Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel on Wednesday, the 7th of May 2025. My name is Karen Hyde. I'm your presiding member. I declare the meeting open at 9:36. I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting the meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and we acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia. Pay our respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations. Members are reminded to announce their names and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll introduce the panel members now. Myself, Karen Hyde, as presiding member. To my right, Francesca Lafante, deputy presiding member. To my left, Peter Lee, specialist member. And further to my right, Councillor Fergus Bennett, local government DAP member from the City of Nedlands, and on screen, Councillor Blaine Brackenridge, local government DAP member from the City of Nedlands. Item 2 on our agenda, apologies from Councillor Rebecca Coghlan, local government DAP member, City of Nedlands. Item 3, members on leave of absence, we have none. Item 4, noting of minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. I will then call for declarations of due consideration. We have 2 items today, both for the City of Nedlands. Could panel members please raise hands to show that they have considered all the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and related information, also noting the R13 responses, which were published for both items on the 2nd of May. Thank you. Due consideration has been given by all. I'll then move to disclosures of interest. Do panel members have any disclosures of interest to raise? Could I ask the councillors, was this matter considered at council? Yes, Councillor Bennett.
Yes, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest impartiality that
Thank you.
Both of these matters have been considered at the 29th of April ordinary council meeting.
Yeah.
But I'll consider both matters on their merits with full impartiality.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Brackenridge, were you at that meeting as well?
Yes, I was, and I declare that I'm not bound by any previous decision or resolution by the City of Nedlands, and I will exercise independent judgment in relation to this DAP application.
Thank you very much. So, having considered that, I determine that there are no impartiality interests that would prevent councillors from participating or voting in relation to the DAP applications at this meeting. We then move to our first item and presentations in accordance with that. The first item is for number 37 Clark Street, Nedlands, for 5 grouped dwellings. And in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders, clause 4.8.2, presentations are limited to 3 minutes. I've not granted any extension of time than that, but I will let you know when you're running close to that time and allow you to wrap up. So if we could focus on the main aspects of what you want to present and the planning matters specifically, that would be much appreciated. And after each presentation, I'll invite the panel members to see if they have any questions of the presenters. All right. So first of all, we have Fiona Munro, who is in support of the RAR recommendation. So Ms. Munro, if you would like to give us your presentation. Thank you.
3 minutes, 7 seconds.
It's fine, that's absolutely fine.
I live at 35 Clark Street, and I want to formally lodge my objection to the proposed development at 37 Clark Street. I've lived at my current address for 24 years, and when we purchased our home, the prospect of subdivision was neither anticipated nor encouraged. Over the years, number 37 has always been rented to a variety of tenants, and while I have occasionally experienced minor disturbances, such as loud student parties and vehicle noise and issue with pets, the overall atmosphere has remained peaceful. However, the current development proposal, the construction of 5 three-story dwellings, represents a significant change that I believe will seriously impact both my privacy and the quality of life, and possibly multiply these minor disturbances by 5. While I understand that subdivision and urban density are keen priorities for growth in the western suburbs, I cannot, in good conscience, remain silent when a development of this scale is being planned right next to my home. The reports state the development is unlikely to have negative impacts on the amenity of the adjoining residences. However, I must respectfully disagree. From my perspective, insufficient consideration has been given to the adverse effects this proposal will have on the surrounding homes. My principal concern lies with the loss of visual privacy. I maintain a private and well-used garden, which serves as both a personal retreat and a safe space for my 2 young grandsons. And I'll add that my son got married in my garden 2 years ago in the front garden, and we had 70 guests for the reception in the back garden. And now, if this development went on, it would have been possible. As I work mainly from home, I spend a significant amount of time in this space. The design of the proposed dwellings, particularly House B, includes multiple upper-level living areas with direct lines of sight into my property, specifically into my garden, ensuite bathroom, bedroom my grandsons use, and my kitchen. I acknowledge that revisions have been made to the original plans, including the removal or repositioning of some windows, and I appreciate these efforts. However, I don't believe they sufficiently address the loss of privacy that will occur. The height and positioning of the proposed home still allows for direct views into private areas of my property. In addition, the height of the development severely diminishes the amount of natural light entering my home, thereby increasing my reliance on artificial lighting. I respectfully request that the scale and design of this development is reconsidered. I strongly believe that more sensitive design changes, particularly those that address height, overlooking and overshadowing, and the number of houses, could help to minimize the impact on surrounding homes without compromising the objectives of infill development.
Thank you for your presentation. Panel members, any questions of Ms Munro? Councillor Brackenridge, did you have any questions? No, thank you. Any from other panel members? Councillor Bennett.
Could you please elaborate on your concerns about privacy and just the orientation of the windows that you're concerned about?
Because most of the main living areas, like the kitchen, the dining area, and the lounge area, is on the first floor. It's above the fence level. And that's where most of the people will be living. And they can look into the garden. And they also look into the windows on the west side of my house. So I was sitting in the kitchen this morning having breakfast and looking out the kitchen window and imagining the property there. And the privacy has gone.
Thank you.
And the light and the view of the sky. So it significantly impacts
Okay, thank you.
the
Other
house.
questions? Thank you, Ms Munro. So if you can remain in the meeting, if you'd like to move to those chairs there, and then we'll call the next presenter up. Thank you. The next presenter is Sean Fairfowl from Lateral Planning, who is presenting against the RAR recommendation. And Mr Fairfowl, same rules of 3 minutes, as you're well aware. When you're ready.
I was ready, and then I changed screens, and now I can't. Doesn't appear to be working. So thank you for the opportunity
Did you
to.
need another couple of
I
minutes?
would prefer that if that's okay. Yeah. Just 325. Oh, okay. Apologies for that.
Okay,
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning on this application at the corner of Clark and Bruce Streets in the city of Nedlands. I did note the question in relation to whether the panel has jurisdiction in relation to this matter. This proposal isn't an excluded development as per the DAP regulations. It's not the construction of a single house or associated structures. It is for 5 dwellings on a single lot, which is clearly a group dwelling. So the panel is able to determine the application this morning. The City's Council provided their own recommendation with respect to the application, and this is justified by the view that the bulk is outside the expectations of an R60 zone and will impact on amenity, and the orientation of the dwellings facing north will impact the amenity and privacy of the adjoining neighbour. The proposal occupies less than 70% of the site coverage allowance in an R60 zone. It's about 60% rather than 70%. The proposal is consistent with the maximum number of stories within an R60 zone at 3 stories. The proposal is well under the maximum building height within an R60 zone of 11 metres, averaging about 10 metres, and it fluctuates as the levels of the land move slightly. And except for the southernmost dwelling, the proposal generally complies with the setbacks, the boundary setbacks. So therefore, the proposed dwellings are therefore at worst consistent with what should be expected within an R60 zone. In terms of the impact to the neighbour, the council recommendation talks about the orientation to the north. I think that's confused with orientation to the east. The buildings and the development face east-west. The plans were orientated in such a manner that north was to the left-hand side of the page rather than north-south, just to fit the plans on, or the property on the plans better. The property to the immediately to the east includes, as you heard, a large single-storey dwelling and a large rear garden. Beyond that dwelling, there's quite a significant amount of vegetation that runs along the boundary. And putting aside the compliance with the setback and privacy provisions in the R codes, which this proposal achieves, the vegetation combined with additional landscaping, the building setbacks and window treatment means that any impact on visual privacy is unlikely and, again, consistent with the requirements for an R60 zone. The other reason for refusal was landscaping, and with respect to that, the proposal retains a number of trees on the property, and the existing verge trees has been modified to keep the verge trees. It complies with the soft landscaping provisions within the R codes. It exceeds the number of trees that are required to be planted, and it exceeds the minimum amount of open space. The landscaping plan was prepared by Kelsey Davey Landscape Architecture, and in my opinion, it's a well thought out and considered solution. I think the suggestion that the proposed landscaping is inadequate or somehow of a poor standard doesn't marry with a proper and thorough review of the proposal and the proposed plan. Overall, the proposal primarily fronts Bruce Street. Bruce Street, particularly on the eastern side, due to the number of east-west side streets, the majority of the orientation of the dwellings on that side face north-south, which results in a number of side fences along this street. There are a few dwellings that orientate towards Bruce Street. This proposal changes that by introducing 5 new dwellings fronting Bruce Street.
close to time.
The activation of the street is significantly improved, and we have worked extensively with the city and the city's DRP, who we thank, with respect to improving the proposal and the outcome that's before you today. So on that basis, we think it is consistent with the R60 zoning, it's consistent with the policy, and on that basis, we'd ask you to adopt the city staff recommendation with the conditions that are proposed by the city staff.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll refer to panel members for questions. First of all, Councillor Brackenridge, did you have questions of this presenter?
Yeah, just Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to the overlooking, I believe it's compliant. It's deemed to comply. Can you just confirm that or not confirm that, please?
Yeah, so in terms of overlooking of the adjoining landowner, the application is compliant with the RCAP requirements. There's a couple of minor non-compliances internally, but in terms of the neighbour to the east, the setbacks of all the rooms combined with the window treatments mean that the application is fully compliant in that respect.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Brackenridge?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I'll refer to panel members in the room. Any questions, Councillor Bennett?
Yes, hello. Does this development have any shared areas that are common to all 5 residences?
The ultimate intent, if the subdivision gets completed, is that no, that it won't, or it may not, but that hasn't been finalised yet.
Okay, so the intent is that it will be subdivided into 5 discrete.
There's a subdivision. There's a subdivision approval that is a strata subdivision, and we haven't got to the point yet where there's been a finalisation as to whether there needs to be any common property for services or anything similar. So I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so
the original intent is no, but that may change.
So the intent is that it is supposed to be 5 discrete dwellings with no shared areas, and the ultimate goal is they could be sold separately.
They could be, whether it's shared or not. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from panel members?
My question, I do have a question.
Yes, thank you.
The material I have been provided before me includes the layout of the site as well as associated documentation. Can you advise?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The layout of the site.
Oh, yes, sorry,
and associated documentation that you've provided.
Yep.
Can you advise whether the layout of the plan as submitted aligns with the survey strata subdivision that was provided as part of additional material?
My understanding is that it does, but I wasn't originally involved, so I'd have to check to be absolutely certain. But I'm pretty sure that it does marry up, and if it doesn't, it might only be some minor tweaks, which again is something that can be addressed as part of a deposited plan if and when we get to that point.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. The survey strata approval, which doesn't at the moment show any common property, is generally treated therefore as a green title. It does require a truncation to be seeded on the corner of the road. If you weren't to proceed with the titling to create individual lots, how would you propose to deal with that truncation?
Happy to take a condition, have a condition on this approval that and an approval if you're of that mind to seed that. I don't think that's an issue. Wouldn't object to that requirement.
And when I, again, as Ms. Levante has done, looked at all the information, again, these properties are individually serviced through waste management. They have their own bin store. In fact, I think the application talks about allowing sufficient room for FOGO and things like that. So they're all independently operated. They're all independently serviced with utilities. They've got their own driveways, etc. There don't appear to be any common walls between buildings. It looks as though the buildings are individually built, so could be staged individually. I'm just trying to get a feel for how this actually ultimately could still remain a grouped dwelling development.
You can't stage a survey, you can't stage a strata. So it either stays on the one lot or it gets subdivided, or we implement the subdivision. There's no guarantee that it could stay as a grouped dwelling in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The intent, I think it's fair to say that it won't pass the definition of a group dwelling in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment, it's one lot, and it is a group dwelling application.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for that. Any further questions of panel members? No? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Fairfax. We will proceed with the item therefore, and we will deal with it in the order. Oh, yes, I do. Sorry, thank you. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. We actually have Kirsty Klimke and Sergio Famiano. Sorry, it's because I went sitting over on this side. So we've got officers from the city to ask questions of. So first of all, Councillor Brackenridge, would you like to ask any questions of the city officers?
No, thank you.
Okay. From panel members in the room, any questions of city officers?
No, thank you. Oh, yes, I could.
Yes, Councillor Bennett.
I believe, are there any conditions that the city could put on this development to ensure it's treated as a grouped dwelling and not separated out?
Just on the matter, I'll respond to that. This is very similar to 111 Warwick. It's virtually identical, other than it's a survey strata, conditional approval for a survey strata versus a conditional approval for a green title development in the case of 100 Waratah. But the circumstances are identical in the sense that each dwelling is on a separate lot. There's no common property, etc., etc. However, I know that the DAP made a decision that 111 Waratah was classified as a single house dwelling development. We don't have that similar opinion. With this particular application, at the time it comes in for assessment, we classify it as a group dwelling development because it is 5 dwellings on a single lot, even though there is a survey strata, conditional approval for a survey strata application. There's no obligation on the party to actually carry through with that survey strata application. So therefore, they could effectively build 5 dwellings on this one lot tomorrow after getting an approval here and getting a building permit and not realise the survey strata. So that's why we're a little bit cautious about determining whether this is a single house development versus a group dwelling development. We look at it as it currently stands. It's a single block. It's got 5 dwellings on it. That meets the definition of group dwelling development. Therefore, in our opinion, should be determined by the development assessment panel.
Thank you.
Further questions of the officers? Could you just confirm for me the actual status of LPP 514?
Yeah, look, well, LPP 5.14 is operational as a policy. There's recently been some modifications to it. So there is a modification to an area called Waratah Avenue, which is the previous application, and also an application you're about to deal with under 6 Alexander. So there is a move to modify the building heights for multiple dwellings and single and group dwellings under the R80 density code. Other than that, and that still needs to go through an advertising process to make that amendment. But other than that, the policy is operational.
Right, and the policy as it applies to this particular area
Yes,
has
Yes.
status?
Yeah, it does apply. Yeah, it's an operational policy. We're just doing a modification to it, but the modification has nothing to do with this application.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of my earlier question around the truncation, which is a requirement, a condition of the survey strata subdivision, how would that apply if this applicant did not actually create the survey strata lots?
I think we provided, an alternate recommendation.
Right,
And I think there is a condition in there. It's 3 by 3, I think it is.
No, that's not in the DAP. So there's no subdivision.
In the subdivision application, there is a,
yes,
but we could put one in the development application.
okay,
It's similar in nature.
okay, all right. Those are my questions. Any further questions of the officers? No, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we then refer to our item. And we will take things in the order as presented in the responsible authority report. And as the first part, we have a recommendation from the responsible authority to refuse this item for a number of reasons, 3 reasons, ABC reasons. Do I have a mover, please, for that as the primary substantive motion? There is, sorry, was that your hand moving? No, there is no mover for that as a primary motion, so that lapses. Therefore, call for an alternate motion. We have an alternate from the officers, but members are able to move any alternate at this point. Is there an alternate motion? Councillor Bennett?
Yes, I would like to propose a refusal in line with the development not being within the remit of the DAP, as it's 5 individual houses.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please, as the substantive motion? Alternate, thank you. Ms. Lafante, would you like to speak to that? First of all, perhaps we should clarify the wording of that. If I read something out to you, would you, have you got the wording there yourself?
No, I don't.
I've got wording. That the DAP refuses to grant development approval to the development application. The reference number is DAP 24027885 because the DA comprises 5 single dwellings, each of which is capable of falling within the definition of single dwellings, single house under the R codes, and I will speak specifically to this detail when I do speak. And each single house is excluded development under the regulation 6.2 of the Planning and Development Act and regulation 2011.
Thank you.
Meaning that the DAP is not within the jurisdiction for and capable of being approved. But I have a number of matters that I will raise when I speak to it.
Yes, all right, thank you. So we're all clear about the motion on the table. Councillor Bennett is mover. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you. Yes, this problem does seem to be similar to a previous decision, and on that occasion, the DAP decided that when assessing a development application, it shouldn't be read in an overly technical way. And so you should take into account the plans and all information that's submitted. And it's clear from the information that's been submitted here that it is, in fact, 5 individual dwellings that intend to be subdivided. And what would be required to make it a group dwelling would be something that ties them all together, such as common areas, such as a common driveway, common private open space, or a a waste management which incorporates all of them. When it's designed in a way such that it gets subdivided into 5 individual houses, it complicates how conditions can actually be enforced, such as how could the landscaping plan, for example, be enforced when there's 5 individual owners? How can you maintain orderly and proper planning and construction in this area when they could piecemeal be built individually over an extended period? So, as I said, the planning regulations are not meant to be read in an overly technical way. When it is implied and the intent is for individual houses, that's how the DAP has to assess it. And as individual houses, it's not within the remit of the DAP to decide on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Ms Lafante is seconder.
Yes, so my starting point was to consider the design details as provided in the plan. I then looked at the legislation. I looked particularly at the following piece of legislation, the Planning and Development Act, which talked about excluded development. I was cognizant of the decision that had previously been made. I looked at the definition of single house, which is under the regulations. It's under the planning regulations, which refers to the R codes. Now, I actually looked at the R codes, volume 1, which is right at the back of volume 1. It has definitions, and it talks about a dwelling standing wholly on its own Greek title or survey strata lot, together with any easements and not supporting walls. Now, then I went back to the development, and hence my conversation to the applicant, who has confirmed that it is likely they align. He also indicated in today's commentary that, and I wrote the words down, that there's no guarantee to stay as a single lot, and that it wouldn't pass the definition on as group dwellings on development of inclusive of the strata subdivision. I then referred to earlier determination by Justice Parry, or Member Parry, in relation to a matter in 2007, which talked about the matters that could be reasonably brought into consideration, and it refers to subdivision approvals, and this is one of those that predetermines to a degree, the type and likely form of development that can apply on that site, and creates a reasonable expectation for that form of development, in this case, a single dwelling, and the nature of that form of dwelling. So putting those together, whilst there are some merits in relation to the configuration and design, my first consideration was the jurisdictional consideration. It has been confirmed that these are 5 separate dwellings with no common area. There is a strata survey conditional approval. The plans show the townhouses that align with that configuration. They are shown as having separate street access designed to function independently. And as the reasons I've given, and going specifically back to those pieces of legislation, as well as Member Parry's commentary, I am of the opinion that this development is classified appropriately as part of the legislation as single dwelling, and therefore should be considered appropriately as that. And for those reasons, I say that it sits outside of the jurisdiction of us on today's meeting, in the context of the material we have in front of us, which includes the information on the status of the survey strata.
Thank you, Ms Lafante. Other speakers for or against? Councillor Brackenridge, did you wish to speak on this motion?
Look, I just want to reiterate what's been said. You know, the subdivision application creates a reasonable expectation for single dwellings on this site. Thank you.
Mr Lee, did you wish to speak? I will make some comment. I agree with the mover and the seconder that my reading of the plans and the information is that this is really an application and should be classified as such for 5 single houses on survey strata lots. It is not, in my view, a grouped dwelling development, there being no current or indication of common property or anything that is designed as integrated in terms of satisfying a grouped dwelling development definition. The Commission's approval implies strongly that it is the intention for this to be individual single homes, and the architect's plans and supporting landscape and servicing information also supports this. And I have given due regard to the subdivision approval in that respect in coming to my decision. So I find that this is an application for single houses, which is an exempt development, and therefore the DAP has no jurisdiction to consider it at this point. So that's all I wish to say. I'll move back to the mover to close debate.
I won't say any more. I think everything's already been said. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. I'll put this matter to the vote then. Those in favour of the motion? That's a unanimous decision. Thank you. That draws this particular item to a close. And then you're welcome to stay because you've got another item here. You're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting if you wish, but equally happy for you to carry on with your busy life. Thank you.
Can you actually, if you determine that it's excluded,
No,
that you've resolved to refuse it?
Where we've resolved it's an excluded decision, an excluded development.
But so that's not a decision to refuse.
Well, we can't give you an approval on your actual
You
development
can't give me a
before us.
refusal either.
Or we can't make a decision on that.
Okay, but as long as that's the decision.
It is an excluded development in our terms.
yes, so we are, effectively, we've dealt with the jurisdictional issue, not the merit of the design.
I get
So we've
that.
incorporated the reasons why we say it's jurisdictionally beyond our power,
Yeah.
but that doesn't automatically conclude that it's an unacceptable or an acceptable
No, no, I
development.
get-
Is
I
that
get
what
that.
I'm-
All
So
I'm
what
saying
we've done is we've refused to grant approval.
So the issue that we have.
Because we
with that
can't.
Respectfully, is that the same head of power in the act that gives you the capacity to refuse it is the same head of power that gives you the capacity to refuse it. So if you resolve, you don't have the capacity to approve it, then equally you don't have the capacity to refuse it. So
Correct.
We haven't,
correct. When
we
we're saying
haven't
it's
made a
beyond our
decision.
jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes,
I know that
yes.
there's no decision.
Yes, correct.
The concern is, I think, on the Waratah review, there was a resolution to refuse it, as opposed to just a resolution that you can't make a decision, which
Indeed.
if that's the direction, then that's
Indeed.
fine, we accept that.
Yes, that's what the motion on this table for just a few months ago was, the jurisdictional question. Yes.
All right,
Sorry, does that, I think we've kind of all saying the same thing in slightly
I think
different
we've
ways.
clarified. Thank you. Okay, so who's staying and who's going? All right, welcome everybody to the DAP meeting. You're all here to make presentations and listen to this part of the meeting. We've actually gone through some of the preliminaries, the welcomes and so forth. So I won't repeat all of that. We'll get straight into all of the presentations before us today, and we have quite a lot to get through. So I would just like to say before we start that presentations are limited to 3 minutes. I think you're all aware of that. I will give you a heads up, an indication of when you're close to your time frame. There's been no extension of time beyond 3 minutes granted for anybody, but you know, if you're a few seconds over or whatever, we're not going to be ruthless about that. What I would do is encourage you to focus primarily on the planning issues. I know in some of your comments there have been other issues raised about, you know, investment bureau and this, that and the other. You're probably best please to leave those aspects aside for other jurisdictions and deal with the planning matters that the DAP is concerned with today. After each of your presentations, and I'm not sure how many of you have done this before, but assuming that this might be your first time, please stay where you are once you've concluded your presentation. And I will invite panel members, who I will introduce to you in a minute, to ask you some questions. And after that, if there may not be any questions, but if there are, after that, please return to your seat and then the next presenter will come forward. So I'm Karen Hyde, I'm your presiding member. To my right, I have Francesca Lafanti, Deputy Presiding Member. To my left, Peter Lee, our Specialist Member. We have our 2 local government DAP members. Councillor Bennett, Fergus Bennett from City of Nedlands, and Councillor Blaine Breckenridge online there from City of Nedlands. So with that, I would like to call our first presenters, Robert and Violet William, who are speaking in support of the Responsible Authority recommendation. And when you're ready, you can start your presentation.
Okay. Good morning, presiding members, ladies and gentlemen. We are owners of 8A Alexander Road, Delhi, the most affected neighbor of the proposed development. Our biggest concern is overshadowing of our home in winter. The living areas we spend most of our time, waking hours, are in shadow from 9 a.m. onwards. The void and circulation spaces are central areas to our home. It has 3 large ceiling to floor windows that brings in the sunlight to the heart of our home. It will be in shadow from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. Outdoor living and pool areas are also shadowed until 1:30. All of you have my submissions and also the overshadowing analysis report. So what I will do now today is to spend the time responding to the developers' latest claims and contradictions. 1, our study shows that on June the 21st at 12 noon, overshadowing intruding into major openings and living areas and internally of our home, number 8A. The developers claim it's contained to the outdoors, and complies with the R code, but definitely not to the R code 3.2.3. 2, the solar excess panels to the rooftop panels. Overshadowing up to 11 a.m. on the 21st, highlighting potential reduction in energy efficiency and a breach of acceptable solar excess guidelines. The developers claim no unreasonable shadow cast on existing solar panels. They state that the solar panels are not affected or receive adequate exposure. The contradiction is we provide explicit time overlay hitting the solar panels. Developers generalize acceptable impacts, avoid addressing overshadowing on the 21st, which is the critical date for compliance. Our studies are time-specific, taken at hourly intervals. Developers claim general time blocks, vague reference to, or like mid-morning or early afternoon. The other thing I want to cover is health and well-being. My wife suffers from cognitive decline, and scientific study shows that prolonged loss of natural sunlight in winter can exacerbate this condition. I plead with you, Please do not destroy the amenity that brings happiness and joy to our new and bright home. On behalf of our neighbors, my wife and I urge you to reject this monstrous 21-bedroom, 20-bathroom master dwelling, causing stress and anxiety. Allow us to live out our twilight years in peace and harmony, preserving the character and serenity of our neighborhood. Thank you for having this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Williams. Any questions of this presenter, Councillor Brackenridge? Thank you. Anything from the panel? Councillor Bennett?
Yes, thank you. Hello. Have you commissioned an expert to measure the overshadowing problem?
Twice.
Twice.
The first time was when the first planning, they said that they were being good solar neighbors. So good that I wasn't happy with it. I commissioned this guy to do the overshadowing. They gave us 0 solar excess, 0. The second time, what it shows is that moving the development to the back, all our living areas are in shadow. The lounge room, the TV room, the dining, the kitchen is in shadow. The void, which is a big part of, it brings in a lot of sunlight. That is in shadow.
So if the overshadowing on the solar panels on your roof is a problem, I imagine lower down where your windows are that are orientated to let northern light in, that must be an even bigger overshadowing problem. Like hardly any light would get in through there, I assume.
I mean, they even show that the overshadowing is on my roof. Yeah, at certain times. So it doesn't, the living areas of the roof.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers. Any other questions? All good. We'll let you go back to a seat. It might be a question of musical chairs in a way. We've got Jeffrey Kahev next. Feel free to move one of these chairs back to allow Mr. and Mrs. Williams to sit together. Thank you.
Could I just have a?
Yes, of course. He needs a chair. Sorry.
A bit too much musical chairs.
Mr. Kahev is presenting in support of the responsible authority recommendation. So I think you've seen the drill, Mr. Kahev. Please feel free to sit. There's no need to stand. It's
Fine.
When you're ready.
Good morning. I'm the owner of 8B Alexander Road, which is located just south of the proposed development at number 6. I respectfully ask the panel to refuse this application, primarily due to concerns with the proposed building height and the resulting impacts on local amenity. Under the city's local planning policy 5.14, the maximum height for multiple dwellings is 3 stories, with a 4th story only permitted where it can be clearly demonstrated that solar access for neighbouring properties is preserved. The proposal before you is 4 stories high, and while it claims to satisfy the minimum 2-hour solar access requirement for 8A Alexander Road, it does not meet the broader intent of the policy, which is to ensure that new development respects the established character and amenity of the area. The impact of this development goes well beyond its immediate neighbour. As the owner of 8B, I am extremely concerned about the bulk and scale of the proposed building and the precedent it would set. Our section of Alexander Road has a distinct low-rise character. All dwellings, existing or approved, are limited to 2 stories. My home, like those around it, was built with the understanding that this streetscape character would be maintained in accordance with the art codes. This proposal undermines that. A 4-story building is not compatible with the surrounding built form, nor with the reasonable expectations of local residents who have invested in this area based on existing planning controls. While the applicant has oriented the fourth-storey massing to the rear, the fact remains this development does not respect the prevailing height or scale of the neighbourhood and fails to achieve element objectives 02.2.1 and 02.2.4 of the R codes. It is important to emphasise that planning decisions are about understanding and preserving community character and livability. In closing, I ask the panel to consider not only what this proposal means for solar access or technical compliance, but what it means for the streetscape and built form of Alexander Road. For these reasons, I respectfully urge you to refuse this development application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clough. Panel members, any questions? Councillor Brackenridge, any questions? No, thank you. Panel members in the room, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Could you elaborate on the existing streetscape character and the way that that this particular street has been developed over the years and the quality of the housing stock?
Yes. So I hark back to the SAT hearing of a couple of years ago when Judge Parry, who was the judge of SAT, came and had a look at our street the morning that the SAT hearing was going to be held. He went into 8A and saw how the overshadowing was going to affect 8A. He came into our house, which is next door to 8A, 8B, had a look at that. He then walked around the whole area. He walked right down Warrata, down Phillip, down our street, and his findings written up on the SAT decision indicated that a four-storey development in this situation would be totally out of character. Every house, the majority of the houses in Alexander are relatively newly built. Our house is something like 10 years old. Newly built on divided blocks. The street actually petitioned the council to change the zoning from R10 to R20 a number of years ago, so that a quarter-acre block could be divided in half, long ways, and two-storey houses could be built side by side. That is what the majority of the houses are in Alexander Road. Relatively new, two-storey houses of a very high quality and expense. And to put a four-storey development in amongst those two-storey houses would stick out like a sore thumb. Totally inappropriate.
Any further questions?
That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from panel members?
No, I don't have any
Good.
questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clough. So we're back to musical chairs again. Robin Chinnery is the next presenter.
Karen, we're just some supportive photos for us. I apologise, it wasn't recorded.
Okay, are we able to put them up and share them, please? Thank you. You seem to have gathered another member of Secretariat here. Thank you for helping.
Is that who I meant to grab?
Well, you're welcome to just sit next to her if you want.
Where am I pointing, Mr. Wood? Just wait a minute. There?
Once we get to the slides up on
Do you
the
want to
screen,
chair?
No, that's all right. I'm used to it. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Chinnery is speaking in support of the RAR, of the Responsible Authority recommendation.
Good morning, presiding members, and panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have lived in my single-storey home at 24 Phillip Road for over 40 years. It's not just a property, it's my family home. My children grew up here and played in our back garden, a safe and private space where the children now love to come and play. We and our neighbours and their families appreciate the privacy and amenity of our back gardens. The proposed multi-storey development at 6 Alexander Road would deprive us of this. The development proposal fails to meet element objective 02.4.4, which requires that side and rear setbacks provide an appropriate transition to the neighbouring lower density properties, which are all single and two-storey dwellings, including many built recently. The developer states the amended plans increase the upper level setbacks to mitigate the bulk of the multi-storey building, but the marginal increases do not adequately address this context. These amended setbacks are still inadequate and do not result in a genuine transition. At the south, 8A Alexander Road will suffer a complete loss of sunlight to its habitable rooms, a major impact to its amenity. The design creates a bulky, overbearing, rectilinear building entirely at odds with the surrounding neighbourhood and fails to deliver the transitional scale required in this residential context. As 6 Alexander Road is midway downhill from Phillip Road, ground levels at the adjoining properties, 8A Alexander Road at the south and 24 Phillip Road at the east, are lower, and also ground levels in the vicinity, including Dalkeith Hall to the east, southeast. Thus, its visual impact will be greater and it will appear more like a 5-storey building from our garden at 24 Phillip Road and the Hall area. It will tower above and overshadow the 2-storey house at 8A, overlook our backyard at 24 Phillip Road and overshadow it in the afternoon, a major impact on our amenity and our mature trees. The amended plans switch the 4th floor from the rear to the front of the building, compounding the detrimental effect on 24 Phillip Road. The developer claims that the proposal complies with LPP 5.14 and qualifies for a 4th-storey, but it does not, as the policy is clear. Any additional height must fit in the context, cause minimal impact to adjoining homes, and respect the area's low to medium scale character. The bulk and scale of the proposed building is not in keeping with the character of the streetscape and does not align with the desired future character of the Waratah precinct, which is explicitly low to medium scale as set out in LPP 5.14. The side and rear setbacks of this design do not achieve the element objectives and uphold the intent of the planning framework. The proposed development does not provide a respectful transition in built form. This development application should be refused because it does not respect context, fails to transition sensitively, delivers an unacceptable bulk due to insufficient side and rear setbacks, and significantly affects the amenity of neighbours and the local community. I urge the panel to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from panel members? Councillor Brackenridge, any questions?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Panel members in the room. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Hello. Your property at 24 Phillip Road, I wonder if in the assessment, perhaps the impact of this development hasn't been considered as much as from the road that it's actually being built on. So could you elaborate your concerns about the bulk and the privacy as somebody who's viewing it from the other side of the development?
Could you just repeat the last part of that, Fergus?
Oh, so I'm just interested in the impacts on your privacy and the impacts of the bulk and scale of the development as viewed from the other perspective on your side, looking at it from behind.
Yeah, well, there's been development in the vicinity, and the properties that front Alexandra Road and Phillip Road at what has become 26 and 28 Phillip Road, 2 Alexandra Road, 4 Alexandra Road, and those at 8 Alexandra Road, because 8 Alexandra Road has also been redeveloped. It's a 2-story property. And again, while it's not directly on the boundary, it is close to our property. So all of those have been 2-story homes built recently and designed in such a way that they preserved the amenity both for their immediate neighbours at the north and south side, but also relating to our property, because each of those have had a setback such that they've had their outdoor areas at the rear of those properties and designed in such a way that they have privacy, but also in terms of protecting our privacy, partly in terms of the actual setbacks and the design, also with the landscaping. So there's been minimal impact in terms of the privacy and use of our backyard. Our backyard is an important amenity for us. We enjoy it each and every day. And as you could probably possibly see when you saw those aerials, the way in which our home was designed, with all of the bedrooms being at the rear of the house at the south, all of those bedrooms look out onto the backyard and are a part of our amenity as well. And each and every day, all of that is important to us. It's also interesting the number of people in the area who comment about trees in our garden when they're walking along Warwick Avenue and in that area, because they look up the hill and the trees and the greenery. And so many people are mourning the loss of so much greenery and trees. And years ago, Alexandra Road was actually designated as a green corridor. And from that point of view, it was emphasised that the trees, both on public land and elsewhere, should be maintained, and trees that were appropriate to the wildlife. And we're at risk of losing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Other panel members' questions? No?
Yes, I do
Yes,
have a
Ms.
question.
Lafanti.
Thank you. I have a question specifically in relation to the privacy concerns from the material that we have here. I have been,
Sorry, I can't hear you.
so I'm referring to the material we have here. I've been to the site as well and had a look around the area, so I have got the
Sorry.
context.
Sorry, my mum's quite deaf.
I still can't
Oh,
hear you clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, my question, I'll go to my question rather than give a preamble. My question is, the material I have here and the location of your house is forward on the property. The plans that we have show the building location looking to the rear portion of your garden with a level of diagonal from an upper level. Is the protection of the garden the aspect you're concerned about, or does it go further into impact within the building?
It's both, because obviously if the building is 4 stories high, then that will look over the whole surrounding area. The greatest impact in terms of visual impact, in terms of overlooking, is on our back garden, but it impacts every aspect of our daily lives.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you for your response. There's no further questions, so we'll let you take your seat back there. The next presenter is Paula Melling. Is Paula in the room?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry,
Oh,
I
right.
just helped my mum.
Sure.
Muddle around with the chairs again.
No problem. Well, I think you presented to the DAP before on other matters, so you know the drill. So
I didn't plan on becoming a regular, Faith. I hope this will be the end of it.
when you're ready. I should say, sorry, Paula is presenting in support of the responsible authority recommendation.
Thank you. Good morning, presiding member and panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. While there are multiple planning concerns with the proposed development, one issue stands out as both fundamental and deeply problematic: the excessive plot ratio. This single metric drives a level of bulk and scale that is visually overwhelming and clearly inconsistent with the expectations set out in the R codes, the city's LPS 3 and LPPs 5.9 and 5.14. The proposed plot ratio of 1.18 exceeds the R code's acceptable outcome for an R80 site by 18%, or 182 square metres. This is not a minor variation. It represents a significant and unjustified departure from the development capacity envisaged by SPP 7.3 and LPP 5.14. The proponent claims this reflects an efficient multi-generational layout. The internal design choices do not override the need to comply with external planning controls, especially when the outcome conflicts with the built form expectations clearly outlined in policy. The extra floor area directly results in built form that exceeds acceptable building envelopes. The outcome is a development simply too large for its context. Plot ratio is not just a number. It is a policy tool used to manage the perceived mass, scale, and impact of development. The developer's planners' dismissal of it as unreliable ignores its embedded role in both state and local policy. When exceeded to this extent, the impacts on height, setbacks, overshadowing, and streetscape cohesion become unavoidable. Alexander is predominantly two-storey in scale, as reinforced by LPP 5.14 precincts, which sets this as the existing and intended character of this street. Yet this proposal presents 3 stories to the street and 4 to the adjoining properties, driven entirely by the inflated plot ratio. It creates a built form that looms over neighbours, fails to transition appropriately, and undermines the coherence of the streetscape. Despite some articulation, the massing remains visually overwhelming. The bulk remains excessive, particularly for the southern neighbour, which will lose all northern sunlight to habitable rooms, a direct outcome of both excessive height and inadequate setbacks. It is important for the panel to give serious weight to the tribunal's decision in WASAP 41, which refused a previous proposal for this very site in 2021. That application had a lower plot ratio of 1.15 to 1, and the tribunal found it incompatible with the streetscape and damaging to residential amenity, including overshadowing. At paragraph 116, it concluded, ultimately, the proposed development is 1 story too high. The same applies here. Even if you remove the top story, plot ratio is still exceeded and this development is too big for the site. The current application at 1.18 is even worse. It is concerning that rather than responding to those findings, the proposal pushes the envelope further. I urge the panel to uphold the same principles and refuse this application for the same reasons: excessive bulk and scale, height, and unacceptable impacts on neighbouring amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Breckenridge, any questions of this presenter?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Panel members in the room, any questions of this presenter? Councillor Bennett.
Hello. You mentioned the transition, I assume, between the Dalkeith village area that's intended to have a higher level of development, of density, to Alexander Road. Can you explain to me what you envisage the transition should be?
So are you talking about along that whole area of Phillip Road?
Just I suppose the area.
Or
where,
Alexander Road?
Yeah, Alexander Road.
So obviously any new development needs to very strongly take into context the character of the site, which is predominantly 2-story homes. And it sits in the middle of that. So it needs to be able to transition effectively between those 2-story homes on either side. The zoning is R80, so they could get 3 stories in there. But it's really important to consider the fact that these lots are narrow lots and that they are orientated east-west. They are not well designed for high zoning. This particular development is more akin to RAC4 than to an R80 zoning. And anything that is built there needs to transition appropriately between those existing 2-story houses. But with this excessive plot ratio and this level of bulk and scale and height, it's so overbearing and there is no transition. It
Thank
does
you.
not fit.
Thanks.
Are you a near neighbour in the vicinity?
Yes, that's correct. So my mum and dad own the property to the rear of that development at 24 Phillip Road. We are currently renting at 1 Alexander Road, which is diagonally across from the house. And we are building a brand new home at 32 Phillip Road.
Okay.
It's important to note that when we bought 32 Phillip Road, it was in this rezoning period, and that was one of the properties that were rezoned to R40. We still chose to build a 2-story house that was in keeping with the context of our area. We have set it back from the street. We've got appropriate setbacks from our neighbours on either side, and we've kept it very much within keeping with this character and context.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions of you.
Can I just raise one thing? The developer, I think it's the architect, included some additional drawings in his speech.
Yes.
I think these drawings are perhaps going to speak to plot ratio, which is something I have addressed in my talk.
Yes.
Without hearing his talk before my speech, I am unable to address or respond to these. I just want to forward that please, if something comes up, then I would like it if you could ask me questions again. But I also think he's going to talk to plot ratio in those diagrams. And I'd like to very carefully note that the diagrams he has are for 7 dwellings, not the 5 dwellings that we have discussed. And the plans that he's going to show are not plans that we have been shown or been privy to before.
All right, well, we can get into that and just trust the panel to ask the right questions at the right time. But thank you for raising that issue.
Thank you very much.
Next, I would like to ask Alan Cleland to come forward, please, for his presentation. Mr. Cleland is speaking in support of the Responsible Authority Report recommendation. When you're ready.
Good morning, President, Member and panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Alexander Road between Waratah Avenue and Phillip Road is a residential street comprised mainly of residences redeveloped in recent years, all to a maximum of 2 stories. These tasteful developments set the tone for the street. Any significant departure from this established maximum height would be totally out of character. This proposed development, described as 5 single dwellings, looks to be misdescribed. This aspect will be dealt with by other speakers. The major problem has arisen because the R codes on the eastern side of Alexander Road was raised to R80 after the majority of these developments occurred. This change was imposed without consultation with residents and the street and was opposed by DAP, as I understand it, with the Minister overriding their recommendation. There are currently redevelopments taking place or approved at 9 and 3A Alexander, both to a maximum height of 2 stories. There has been no opposition to these developments, either from neighbours or other residents of the street. I am confident that most people recognise the need for increased density to address the problem of urban sprawl, provided it is carried out in a reasonable manner. What is clearly not acceptable to the vast majority of residents is to arbitrarily change the process by amending upward the R codes after the majority of dwellings in a short section of street have been tastefully redeveloped. Actions such as this are bound to attract determined opposition and will inevitably complicate and slow down the whole process and increase the cost to all involved. As a resident of 4B Alexander Road, I find this development unacceptable because it is not only totally out of character with the rest of the street, but at 4 stories will seriously adversely affect our privacy, particularly in respect of our rear garden. I respectfully request the panel to reject this proposal. In order to encourage future proposals for redevelopment that are compliant and will not attract opposition from local residents, restore the R code classification to the less intrusive R60 on the east side of this section of Alexander Road. I'm confident reducing the zoning to R60 would greatly assist with future redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I should say that we, as a development assessment panel, don't have control over the R coding and matters pertaining to the city's planning scheme. However, understand your context to what you're saying.
The point needs to be made.
Indeed, thank you. Councillor Brackenridge, did you have any questions of the presenter?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Panel members in the room, any questions? Councillor Bennett.
Hello, Mr. Cleland. So your property is 4B. Is that directly north of the development? So could you elaborate your concerns about privacy and bulk and scale? Because since you're quite closely located to the development.
Bulk and scale would simply feel like we're living in St George's Terrace with high-rise buildings all around us. It is totally out of keeping with the rest of the 2-story developments in the area. And in particular, we have a very pleasant rear garden, which is one of the things that attracted us to the property when we bought it. That will have no privacy from any of the floors above 2 floors. I think that is totally unacceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no further questions. We'll let you go back to wherever you can find a seat. And the next presenter is Alex Campbell, also presenting in support of the Responsible Authority recommendation. When you're ready.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity of being able to present today. Being somewhat visually impaired, I'm not reading the presentation I believe you have in front of you.
Yes.
And I believe you also have photographs showing parking difficulties we're already experiencing in the street. So I'll be focusing my points on that parking and traffic while fully supporting the speakers about the bulk scale density and everything else. We live at 3A Alexander Road, which is sort of diagonally opposite the proposed build. We're one of those recently built homes that others have already described. And the point that I really want to emphasise is the nature of the street being a busy thoroughfare between Phillip Road and Waratah, which services many of the Dalkeith residents to the north of that busy shopping precinct. The street is currently allowing, it's a relatively narrow, small street. It currently allows parking only on one side of the street with a 2-hour limit during the appropriate working hours. Now, because of those aspects and because of its location next to the Waratah shopping precinct, cafes, coffee shops and all that sort of thing, parking is an absolute premium already prior to any further development in the area. It is obviously used by service vehicles, lawn mowing contractors, etc., delivery vans delivering to the local residents, and also visitors to the existing local residents. Now, very often the appropriate parking bays, and there's only 10 of them available at any time, are often parked out. There's no opportunity for the people I've described to park, and you see them circling the block looking for parking somewhere nearby or hoping one will soon become available. It's becoming increasingly difficult as it is without this proposed development, which would further exacerbate the problem. So just to consider the parking aspects of the proposed development, with the number of bedrooms and en suites, it would indicate high occupancy by adults, often 2 to a bedroom under various marital or other living arrangements. And these days, most of those adult residents would have cars. Now, there's only 10 parking bays available on site. That is for residents and for visitors. And with that number of bedrooms, and often, or many of which would have two adults in them, the on-site parking provided by the development is totally inadequate, and it's just going to exacerbate an already crowded street. So that's the main points I'm wishing to make. The City of Nedlands is supporting the fact that the development is inappropriate for the area. The residents of the street, of which we are one, also against the proposal. So it would be our sincere hope that the DAP would also support the council and residents in these aspects. So thank you for the opportunity of being able to present today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Councillor Brackenridge, did you have any questions of the presenter?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Panel members in the room, any questions? Councillor Bennett?
Just to clarify, so you're concerned that there'll be more adults living at this development and the parking is insufficient? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions of the presenter. We'll let you go back to your seat. And the next presenter is Kristen Melling. By the way, we have got some more glasses in, so if anybody needs a glass of water, please help yourself. Mr. Melling is presenting in support of the responsibility recommendation.
Right. Good morning, presiding member and panel members. Thank you for the opportunity today to discuss the proposed 4-storey apartment buildings at 6 Alexander Road, Dalkeith. I wish to focus my remarks on the issue of the impact this development may have on the area's ageing infrastructure. The building would contain 21 bedrooms, 21 bathrooms and 8 kitchens, a scale of occupancy and density far beyond anything the area's infrastructure was originally designed to accommodate. And the question is whether the existing utilities infrastructure can cope with something like this. And the answer is likely to be no. Dalkeith's roads, water, sewage, stormwater and power were designed and built decades ago to serve the low-density residential model. The cumulative strain that this and similar developments would impose is significant and likely to lead to costly public upgrade projects. The water and sewer system will be among the first to feel the impact. With 21 bathrooms and 8 kitchens, this one building could generate the equivalent water usage and wastewater output of an entire street of homes. Our sewer infrastructure was never built for this kind of concentrated load at peak times, and aging pipes are already vulnerable to blockages and failures. Increased pressure and volume could lead to overflows, backups, flooding and health hazards, not just on this development site, but across the surrounding areas. The same thing is true for stormwater management. The site's building footprint reduces permeable surface area, increasing the runoff volumes, and our dated stormwater system may not be able to absorb this kind of load during a storm. Waste management is also a logistical and hygiene concern. A development generating this volume of household waste and recycling far exceeds normal curbside capacity, raising questions about how bins will be stored, collected and managed, especially on a residential street not intended for bulk waste movements. Electricity and telecommunications infrastructure would also be under strain. High-density living requires significantly higher power loads, and a load across 21 bedrooms and 8 kitchens will be huge. These demands may trigger network stress, interruptions, and necessitate upgrades to local transformers, substations, and power lines, disruptions that will be felt by all of the surrounding residents. The traffic and road infrastructure present additional pressure points. The influx of residents, service vehicles, deliveries, vehicles, and possibly multiple vehicles per dwelling will introduce traffic and parking levels inconsistent with the street's narrow design. This will not only increase congestion and noise, but elevate risks for pedestrians and school children who walk these streets daily. When all these factors are considered together, the situation becomes clear. The infrastructure in this area is simply not equipped or intended to absorb a development of this scale. We respectfully ask you to decline.
Thank you, Mr. Melling. Just stay where you are, because
Yes,
there's always
of course.
questions. Councillor Breckenridge, any questions?
No, thank you.
Panel members in the round? Okay, thank you. No, you're good to go. Thank you. The next presenter is Tony. Now, is it Kamachi? Welcome, thank you. And Mr. Kamachi is speaking in support of the responsible authority recommendation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm addressing you both as a local ratepayer in the City of Nedlands and as a builder and professional developer. We have ongoing projects in Nedlands, Dalkeith and Swanbourne. My work is grounded in a strong belief in responsible development, and I believe the importance in delivering high-level homes or high-level downsizing homes that are fully compliant with planning frameworks and respectful to local character and streetscape. We currently have 2 homes under construction on the west side of Alexander Road, 9A and 9B. These homes have been carefully designed in full alignment with the city's local planning scheme and the R codes. Our garages are accessed via the laneway to reduce congestion on Alexander Road as well. Each dwelling includes 3 car bays on site. This will prevent overflow parking onto Alexander Road. These design decisions are not just about compliance. They reflect a commitment to good design, neighbourly development, and long-term livability. Importantly, they also add to the local housing stock in a way that is sustainable, respectful, and consistent with the character of the streetscape and the area. In contrast, the development application before you today seeks approval for a 4-storey development. It significantly exceeds the 2-storey character of Alexander Road. It does not meet key element objectives of the R code. It fails to appropriately sorry, I didn't bring my glasses. Apologies.
It's okay. I'm reading
appropriately to neighbouring low-scale dwellings, and it will severely affect the amenities of the adjoining properties, particularly through the overshadowing and excess building bulk. To be clear, I'm not opposed to any developments in the area. I support them. I support well-planned ones, but we must be aligned with the planning framework, not forced upon a community not to be forced upon in a community in ways that are inconsistent with its character or streetscape. Allowing this proposal when it is clearly conflicts the R codes, established planning policies and local character sets a troubled precedent. It undermines developers like us who follow the rules, invest in design quality, and do the right thing on every occasion. It also undermines the integrity of the planning system itself. I believe respectfully that the very purpose for which the development assessment panel exists. Good developers can and do deliver profitable, well-designed homes that enhance local areas while remaining fully compliant. The purpose is contrary to that standard. I urge the panel to support the recommendation of the responsible authority report and refuse this application. I trust that the panel will continue to uphold integrity of Western Australia's planning framework and protect the character of the local neighbours and neighbourhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crouch. I have the same problem with my specs with and
I left
without.
them in the
It's
car.
just-
Yes.
It's a disaster, isn't it, when that
Yes.
happens? Councillor Brackenridge, any questions of this presenter?
No, thank you.
Any from the panel? No, that's grand,
Thank
thank you. The next presenter is Kylie Bennett. And Ms Bennett is speaking in support of the responsible authority recommendation. When you're ready.
Good morning, Chair and panel members. Thank you for inviting us here today. We're in the midst of a housing crisis in Western Australia. Every planning decision you make must address that reality. Approving a project of this nature diverts skilled labour and materials from the housing market, resources that should be going toward the construction of homes and units for local families, not building luxury compounds for foreign residents' use. Is it a single family residence? The DA asks this panel to approve a family's chameleon 21 bedroom mega mansion, submitted as 5 multiple dwellings, or is it 7 apartments as shown in yesterday's 16:35 PM submission, but clearly described by the applicant and by the owner in email correspondence as a single family's home. That directly contradicts the formal application, which describes it as multiple dwellings, a classification that allows assessments by this panel rather than the City of Nedlands. Is it for use not listed? When we examine the evolution of the design, a deeper concern emerges. Earlier revisions of this development included 8 bedrooms in a single apartment. The final design still includes 7 bedrooms in a single apartment, but it's extremely unusual. Even more concerning, earlier versions of the design contained windowless rooms. Again, highly irregular and inconsistent with principles of good residential planning. These are not design oversights. They speak to an intention to design something other than 5 or maybe 7 dwellings. Throughout 4 design iterations, we've seen consistent features that align more closely with a use not listed, such as short stay accommodation, student housing, or similar high occupancy transient uses. Features like ensuite bathrooms for nearly every bedroom, windowless rooms, and 7 bedroom apartments are not typical of conventional apartments in WA. Whether it's chalk, cheese, or chook feet, it's not what we expected. If the intent is to use this building in a way not stated in the application, then it must be advertised and assessed as such before it reaches this panel. To do otherwise undermines the integrity of our planning system. Planning regulations exist for a reason. They protect our neighbourhoods, ensure transparency, and promote fair, purpose-driven development. This proposal undermines all 3. It is inappropriate in form, very unclear in its intent, and out of touch with the housing needs of Western Australians. This chameleon 21 bedroom mega mansion does not deserve approval. It deserves scrutiny, transparency, and ultimately rejection. I respectfully urge the panel to uphold the recommendation for refusal in the RAR, uphold the unanimous decision of the City of Nedlands councillors. It deserves, to reject the proposal and uphold and respect Judge Parry's 2021 WhatsApp 41 decision and listen to the strong and consistent objections raised by the neighbours and local community. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Ms Bennett. Councillor Brackenridge, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, panel members in the room. Any questions?
No.
No, thank you. Are you a local? You're a
I
nearby?
live diagonally
Opposite.
yes,
Thank you
7A.
very much for that. Thank you. Next, we have Rex Hubbard. Rex actually provided a bit of an update to some of his presentation notes, which we received. So when you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and panel members. I live at 7A Alexander Road, diagonally opposite the planned development. If this 21-bedroom family mega mansion is assessed without bias under the R codes or in full consideration of the WASAT 41 decision, then it should be refused outright. However, if more reasons are required to justify the rejection, then foreign investment compliance should be considered. I respect to your points earlier, Chair, that, that they're outside the remit of the DAP.
Indeed.
I'd just like to read a few sentences and I would ask, I'll start from the start. The owner of the property is Universal United Investments Proprietary Limited. According to the attached ASIC company extract in my submission, both of the ordinary shareholders of this company reside in the People's Republic of China. Therefore, Foreign Investment Review Board restrictions are likely to apply. Foreign investment FIRB restrictions can also apply to Australian residents or citizens residing overseas. I hope you don't approve this family's mansion, but if you do, then I request you make it a condition of approval that FIRB approval must be obtained. And I think the DAP could reasonably do that. Just a condition of approval that FIRB approval be obtained first. Treasury Guidance Note number 14 makes it clear, if a third party knowingly facilitates a breach of FIRB laws, they may be liable for penalties as if they committed the breach themselves. I'll move on. Separately, although the applicant's documentation, including the waste management plan, throughout the applicant's documentation, including the waste management plan and the design report, a caretaker is recurrently mentioned. Apartment G02 is identified as being reserved for a living caretaker. Again, I hope you don't approve this family's mansion, but if you do, then I request that you make it a condition of approval that the apartment G02 is for the exclusive use of a legally employed full-time caretaker, and or furthermore, that a restrictive covenant be placed on the title to enforce this condition in perpetuity. Without such a safeguard, apartment G02 could easily become just another rental unit, undermining the operational model described by the applicant. Separately, yesterday afternoon at 4:35 p.m, plans for a 7-apartment design were added to the DAP's related information. This late change denied me and everybody else a fair time to review it. However, I make the following commentary. 7 apartments, as illustrated in those plans, would arguably reduce the calculated plot ratio of the building. However, 7 apartments would also require much more parking in accordance with the R codes. And we thank the architect for illustrating this point that the neighbours are making. Both the applicant and the owner have stated this will be a single family's home. However, if this single family's mega mansion, if a plot ratio was calculated for this building as a single family home, then the plot ratio would be substantially greater than 1.18. So you can either choose to reflect on a plot ratio calculated for 7 apartments or a plot ratio for a single family home. But what we have before us today, at least, is a claimed building of 5 apartments with a plot ratio of 1.18. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just stay there. I'll invite questions. Councillor Brackenridge, did you have any questions?
I thank you.
Any from panel members in the room?
No, I don't have any questions.
Councillor Bennett.
Yes, could you elaborate a little bit more on the difference between the plot ratios between it being assessed as a home or a grouped dwelling, and also elaborate on the caretaker apartment?
Yeah, sure. Well, so the caretaker's apartment, I think, is what it is. I am concerned that that might be sold off or rented to a non-caretaker in the near term or in the future, let's say. And therefore, I would, if this is a basis of the development application, then let it be enforced in perpetuity with a restrictive covenant on the property title. As for the plot ratio issue, yeah, well, my understanding, I'm not an expert in calculating plot ratios, they're quite nuanced, but if there was a single apartment on an entire floor, then most of that area would count towards the plot ratio, is my understanding. If there were 2 apartments within that same envelope of that single floor, but 2 apartments, then I think the gaps in the public areas in between those 2 apartments do not get counted towards the plot ratio. So I think I can only assume that the reason a 7 apartment design is being illustrated is to maybe make the claim that the plot ratio would actually be lower if it was a 7 apartment building rather than a 5 one. This is speculation. I don't know. All I can say is I saw this stuff at 4:35 yesterday afternoon, and I've had to speculate like fury as to why it is there. But I do return to my old point too. If it was a single family home, all of the areas within all of the floors would count towards a plot ratio, and you'd have a plot ratio of like 1.33 or something more than that, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. We'll let you go. Next, we have Carmen Tutor presenting in support of the responsibility report recommendation.
Madam Chair, panel members and members of the public, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Due to the 3-minute time limit, I will focus on the most critical concerns. In 2021, Judge Parry's WA SAT 41 decision rejected a similar proposal at this site, citing non-compliance with key elements of the R Codes, Volume 2, building height, plot ratio, east-west orientation, overshadowing, and Clause 67 of the planning regulations. The current proposal is worse. The responsible authority report rightly recommends refusal, noting the same issues: a 4-story structure that overwhelms a 2-story streetscape, divides the street visually as it is positioned centrally, and it intrudes on neighbouring amenity. This huge bulky building of 4 stories is visible from all angles, despite articulation. Additional concerns is of the local planning policy, changes to the local planning policy LPP 5.8, now 5.14. It was developed through extensive community consultation with council, councillors, the Nedlands Ratepayers Association and locals who met at my then home, 8A Alexander Road, resulting in a petition with 268 signatures presented to the council meeting on August 2019, and it was approved by the Minister as Scheme Amendment number 8. Overshadowing all north-facing living areas of ground floor at 8A Alexander are a major impact on the health of the southern neighbours and daylight access. Increased traffic and parking pressure on this short, narrow street, unjustified strain on local infrastructure, and a serious concerns over the building's actual intended use, which appears more like a multi-purpose commercial development. The community, council and immediate neighbours all supported an approved alternative, a building of 4 by 3-story group dwellings that aligned with the planning objectives and the local character. In conclusion, I urge the panel to uphold the RAR recommendations to refuse, respect Council's unanimous stance, and give way to the WA SAT 41 ruling and support the consistent community objections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tutor. Councillor Brackenridge, any questions of the presenter?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Panel members in the room, any questions? Councillor Bennett.
Hello, Ms. Tudor. I understand that you previously owned the property to the south of the development.
Yes.
And so could you elaborate a little bit more on the history of the previous development? And you mentioned a 4 by 3-story group dwelling development. Is that comparable in terms of plot ratio and the number of people that could reside there?
Yes. So I built 8A Alexander Road up here. It is an amazing house, and the whole northern side, it's all orientated to the north side so that the sun can enter the property. At 11 o'clock, it's bathed in light in the morning. I believe that the current developers are saying that it is shadowed by the fence, and that is not true. And I have got proof of everything I have said. I have documentation with me today to prove so. So the solar panels will be definitely in zero sunlight, and it's a health hazard. So the building is definitely not appropriate. I dealt directly with BHY Holdings, who were the previous owner, developers, and we provided floor plans, which the current developers have obtained somehow, of my home. And I sat down with the developers and we designed a property that would be acceptable to the residents of the street and to the developers. So we designed 4x3 group dwellings because they wanted to build 4 apartments. And I suggested instead of going vertical, let's go horizontal, and that will appease everyone. So we both sat down and with the consultation of the street, community, City of Nedlands, and Nedlands Ratepayers Association, whom I invited and had several meetings, we came up with what we needed to have at 8A Alexander so that everyone could enjoy their lifestyle. And they were produced and they were sent to the City of Nedlands for approval, and they were signed off by 8A Alexander, myself, and by 4A Alexander, who have moved since. But we signed the plans off and we were all happy. The property then, BHY decided not to build, and they sold the property, to my knowledge, by the selling agent, John Hunter from William Porter's Properties. They sold the plans with it. And I was personally advised that the new owners would be building immediately. And the reason they had bought the property was because the plans were ready to commence. That didn't happen. We then had a demolition permit, and demolition experts came to have a look at the properties in Alexander Road, and we were all compliant with all of that. In fact, I wrote to the owner and welcomed her to the street because we're a very close-knit street, and invited her to join us, but I was told that she lived overseas and couldn't. But there is approved plans that 4 3-story group dwellings approved.
Thank you.
All good. All good. Thank you. I believe the next name on the list, Jonathan Houston, just wants the written considered rather than to present, and rest assured we have certainly done that. Thank you. In addition, we have received a written submission from Craig Wallace from Lavin, including an update yesterday evening in response to other material prepared by others. So now we will move to Daniel Hollingworth of Lateral Planning, who is speaking against the responsible authority recommendation.
If I may, I thought it might just be easier if the 3 of us all sat here at the same time.
All right, following Daniel, there will be a presentation by Felipe Soto of Space Agency, the architect who is speaking against the Responsibility Authority recommendation, and by Philip Dobson of Hodgkin Hanley, who is also speaking against the Responsible Authority recommendation. I might just seek questions between each of you, but we'll see how we go. But it's strictly 3 minutes each.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I was hoping that we might be able to have Felipe, Philip, and then myself as well.
So you want to change the order. So you want to have Felipe, Philip, and then you, Daniel.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes. When you're ready.
We got a presentation.
You have a presentation.
Yes,
we will
okay.
bring it up on screen.
Thank you. Got it. All right.
Okay, when you're ready.
All right. I'm Felipe Soto. I'm part of the design team behind this proposal, and thank you for the opportunity to present today our proposal for 6 Alexander Drive. Our proposal before you today is the result of a positive engagement with the design review panel over 3 separate occasions. It is difficult to understand the reasoning behind the officer's recommendation for refusal, especially when the DRP acknowledges that our proposal relates to the narrow grain of the street. We have addressed all the privacy concerns that were raised through the design review panel process, and more importantly, our proposal complies with the overshadowing requirements within the local planning scheme, a key consideration from granting any additional height with the current planning scheme. The streetscape was a key element through the design process. Our proposal presents a duplex development that marries both the present and the future of the streetscape. The studies were undertaken to understand the proportions and rhythms of the street, ensuring a seamless transition between the existing and the new. Photo montages were presented to the DRP to demonstrate why the massing aligns with the streetscape outcome and to show that concerns around bulk and scale have been addressed. In fact, our proposal sits below the 10 meters maximum height outlined in the previous planning scheme. The additional height has been relocated to the eastern part of the site, ensuring that the bulk and scale of the building are not visible to pedestrians along Alexander Drive. A key aspect of our response to the contest was understanding a neighboring property to the south. The existing layout of this single residential property, as shown on the screen, places the main circulation of the house to the northern part of the property, while all the bedrooms and living areas are located to the southern part. The living and dining areas are positioned on the eastern with a primary look towards the eastern part of the lot. A comparison between a 10 meters view form and our proposal demonstrates that both will result in a similar outcome regarding overshadowing. In fact, any additional overshadowing caused by our proposal is limited to the roof, as shown in the diagram that you guys got on the screen. In fact, our proposal exceeds the requirements of the current planning scheme by providing nearly 6 hours of direct solar access to the existing solar panels, which is 3 times the required amount. These diagrams demonstrate that additional height can be granted, and the current planning scheme policy supports well-considered development at this height, fitting seamlessly within the context. The proposal before you demonstrates that through good design and a good engagement with the design review panel, well-considered bulk and scale strategies, a 4-story development can successfully integrate with the existing context. Multiple assessment diagrams have been provided through the design report and the different DRP meetings to offer sufficient information to the DRP to get the full support. Given the strength of the proposal and the full backing of the local design review panel, I respectfully request that the panel not to endorse the council's recommendation for refusal and kindly request to the panel to approve this development application.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Now, did panel members wish to ask questions now or hear from the other presenters?
I'm happy to hear from presenters.
Yeah, okay, we'll run straight through then if that's okay. Obviously, if they're staying there, we can direct questions to them. So next then we have Philip Dobson from Hodgkin Handley. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you, panel. Before I get started, I'd make a passing comment that matters of race and foreign ownership.
Well, which is why I made my comment at the very beginning. So let's move on.
Okay, thank you. I wish to address the planning framework. There appears to have been an attempt perhaps to muddy the waters about what the relevant planning framework is. And in my submission, the planning framework is clear. Local Planning Policy 5.8 has been revoked. Regardless of what has been said in respect of the revocation in a recent letter from Lavin Legal, there can be no serious contention that Local Planning Policy 5.8 is relevant to the task before the panel today. The relevant planning policy that must be considered to guide the assessment of the application by this panel is Policy 5.14. Of some concern, seemingly, is the extraordinary recent plans by the local authority to re-enliven Policy 5.8 or to amend Policy 5.14 in a way that would adopt some aspects of Local Policy 5.8 to address this particular development. Such an approach is extraordinary and contrary to the mandatory principles of orderly and proper planning. The decision of the tribunal, to which quite a bit of reference have been made in the BHY Alexander Unit Trust decision, found that policy 5.8 was to be given no weight because it was a reactionary response specifically directed at preventing a development of this property. In that decision, the tribunal cited with approval a previous decision which established this, and I will just cite this from paragraph, directly from the decision at paragraph 41. In having due regard to a policy, the tribunal would generally give little weight to a policy which is in substance responsive to a particular pending development application. Such a policy is unlikely to be based on sound town planning principles, is unlikely to have been conceived after considerable public discussion, would be in operation for a relatively short time and would not have been continuously applied, and indeed would be intended to be applied for the first time in assessing the particular pending development application. Furthermore, obviously, the pending development application would not have been conceived and designed to address a planning policy which was formulated in response to it. While strategic planning is necessarily fluid and constantly evolving, orderly and proper planning is premised on strategic planning, guiding the formulation and assessment of development applications, rather than a particular development application being the catalyst for the formulation and adoption of planning policy that is then used to assess that application. Please note that any reliance on the city's recent attempts to initiate a reactionary policy would be against the principles of orderly and proper planning. And in that regard, I would commend the observations made in Mr. Hollingworth's submission to the tribunal, identifying the difficulties that would arise in any event in having either two policies operating at the same time, or a policy that seeks to, what would seem to be on the fly, bring across aspects of a policy that has been revoked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to Daniel Hollingworth speaking against the responsible authority recommendation.
Thank you very much, presiding member. Daniel Hollingworth with Lateral Planning. We're the applicant for the item at 3.2. You've read my written submission, so I'm not going to cover the same ground. I'm only going to deal with the planning considerations that are relevant to the determination of this application on its merits, having regard to that framework. So we need to reiterate that the site is allocated a density code of R80. There's been a lot of discussion today about the dissatisfaction about the application of that density code, but fundamentally the allocation of R80 is alive and is the framework against which the application needs to be considered. Several years ago, there was an attempt to reduce the density code that is applied to the site. However, the amendment insofar as it related to the site was refused by the minister. Any contention that the BHY decision attempts to or does mitigate the density that's applied to the site is without any basis. The city has made it very clear in their report to council that the R80 density is intended to provide a transition from the RAC3 land to the east to the R40 land to the west. And the need to provide for that transition was identified and commented on by the tribunal in the BHY decision, in which it said the eastern half of the site provides an opportunity for transition in height between potentially 6-storey development in the RAC3 coded areas and likely future predominant 2 to 3-storey development fronting Alexander Road. Tribunal then said such development would appropriately respond to the desired future scale and character of the street. In this context, the BHY decision is relevant in 2 limited ways, in my view. It confirms that 4 stories in the eastern portion of the site is capable of satisfying the element objectives, and that the former policy framework is to be given no weight as it's fundamentally flawed. It's very clear that LPP 5.8 isn't applicable. It was revoked by the council in August of 2024, and there doesn't seem to be any debate about that. At that same meeting, LPP 5.14 was introduced, and that was introduced following considerable modelling by the city of the area of the built form outcomes contemplated by the policy, public consultation and deliberation by the council. LPP 5.14 therefore forms the basis of the primary controls assessment of the proposal, and the development is generally compliant with that policy. We do propose a variation to the plot ratio, and we have said and continue to say that that is on the basis of the intergenerational or multi-generational nature of the development, and of itself and in isolation isn't a reliable indicator of building bulk. And then noting and applying that planning framework, the design review panel has provided support for the application in what was quite a difficult process, but very well received in granting 10 greens to the application. So in conclusion, I think it's important to bear in mind the basic salient points of the site, the application and the planning framework, in that the site is allocated density code of R80, and that has been reinforced by the Minister. The Tribunal has provided commentary on the capacity of the site to accommodate four-storey development. The City has diligently prepared a planning framework which contemplates this type of development. The City has set out that four-storey development is expected in the R80 density. The planning framework intends for the site to function as a transition from higher to lower densities. The proposed development is compliant with the vast majority of the planning framework. Independent design review supports the development, and the development is a well-considered, high-quality proposal that responds to the framework and the locality. So on that basis, we respectfully request that you move the alternate recommendation for approval, and of course we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hollingworth. Right, let's move to questions by the panel of any of these three presenters. I'll start with our member on screen, Councillor Brackenridge. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Panel members in the room, questions? Ms. Lafanti.
Yes, I have some questions. Probably to yourself, Daniel, and possibly Philippe. You talked about multi-generational dwelling, and we've heard response and commentary today on the update to the floor layout. Can both of you speak to those aspects in further detail for me in the context of the proposal in front of us?
I'm happy to speak in the first instance to the nature of the development.
Probably if we can use our sort of big voices for those in the room so that they can all hear. Thank you very much.
The intention is that the development is occupied by a family. It's not a single family to the extent that it is mum and dad and just children. It's mum and dad are intended to live in the upper level dwelling. The daughter will live in the second story with their family. Son lives in first story with their family. Cousin in the ground floor fronting unit, and a caretaker at the rear. I'm happy to talk to the updated plans that were provided in the presentation material for Felipe yesterday, and I'm sure he'll have some comments as well. The intention of those plans isn't to provide an alternate dwelling typology or layout that we're seeking approval for. What it was intending to do is highlight the binary nature of the plot ratio calculation methodology in the R codes, and that an efficient, well-planned floor plate is prone to being penalised by that calculation. Whereas if the floor plate was divided into 2 or 3 separate apartments, we would have the benefit of additional exclusions. And those exclusions wouldn't have any meaningful effect on the external appearance of the development, and certainly wouldn't change what we already say is an acceptable built form response to the site. All it would do would tick a binary box that I've already said isn't a reliable indicator of bulk and scale of itself.
Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Well, I think I would agree that it's probably an unusual sort of brief when we were sort of starting the process, right? And that was one of the early conversations that we had with the design review panel. And actually that was an attractive part of the process with them, in the sense that it's not your typical developer doing a development and walking away. This is for a singular, it's a family, all family are coming in here. It's obviously mom and dad, as Daniel sort of explained, living at the top, the 2 kids taking level 1 and level 2, a family member taking the apartment on the ground floor facing the street, and a caretaker that will be traveling with them when they are moving in or coming to Perth will be living on that sort of back apartment on the courtyard on the eastern side. And it's also the extended family. It's all also about the daughter having a husband and the family being able to come to Australia for a holiday and spending time in here. So I agree that is an unusual sort of brief to some extent, but actually was one of the key points that we actually discussed with the design review panel early in the process as a point of difference what we were trying to do here. So this is not your typical developer building something and walking away. It's for a family that is going to be staying here.
So what are you saying the development form that we have in front of us you're asking for? I've heard today you've spoken about multi-generational.
Yes.
You've talked about family members living on different levels. What is the actual development that you're requesting of us today? My understanding is it's 5 multiple.
5,
dwellings.
yes,
Multiple dwellings, that's
correct.
So the significance of multi-generational development, what is it you want us to take away from as a element of this proposal?
It was simply to provide context to the application, not to muddy the waters. It was intended to provide some context to the size of the apartments and the nature of them.
Now, the R codes and the planning provisions speak to definitions of development. And one of those is definitions dwelling. And it defines how those dwellings are defined under the R codes. I know from the plans that I have in front of me, and I'm not talking about the material that was submitted as part of the presentation, the WA SAT decision 41 of 201 talked about speculative development as being essentially irrelevant for the purpose of the discussion. So I'm containing my questions to the proposal in front of us. Can I get you to speak through the development? The plans I have a floor areas with many areas non-defined and a floor layout that is extremely unusual with, as I said already, non-specified spaces in it. The plans I have, they're the ones in the application.
Is it possible to get those plans on the screen?
Those plans are in the
responsible search report on page.
Excuse me, panel, while you're looking for the relevant pages, I'm wondering if I might be excused. I have another point that I need to attend.
We're so used to swapping jobs now, so we can be the same person. Yes, indeed.
No,
thank you for your
thank you.
presentation.
Sorry.
Just one thing. The Lord Van's second submission was a rebuttal of some of the points.
And I did speak to that and say that there was additional information provided last night. Thank you. So Secretariat, have you pulled up the? It's about there. 134 starts the fire tank area, and on it goes.
We can work through these plans, some clarification from my perspective.
So we're still trying to pull them up.
Find it. So,
perfect. Thank you very much.
This is the ground level, which shows a unit with central parking. On the level, as we move up, there are substantial areas in
go to the next
So we
floor.
can move up to the next level. There are substantial areas. When you come out of the lobby, you go to the living area. There is what appears to be a kitchen and substantial spaces behind it undefined.
Yes.
And as we move to the rear, there is spaces at the rear that are undefined, which could be secondary kitchen and or laundry. And there's an area that's got lots of little, what look like lockers to me.
Yeah.
I don't have a detailed set of plan that actually shows the elevation in this internal
Is that okay if I
building.
just walk to the screen and I take you through
And
what the plans look like?
there's another area
Well,
in
no,
there.
because councillor Brackenridge
Ah.
won't be able to see you if you
Okay.
do that.
So just going to your first point. So walk out from the lift, what you find is a little sort of waiting area where you'll be finding probably additional cabinet work for storage for umbrella, shoes, and jacket. Then when you go to the living and dining area, which is facing the street, what you have behind the kitchen is a pantry and a scullery. So one of the parts of the brief is there are big cooks at home. And the kitchen facing the living and dining space is more a display sort of kitchen, and the heavy kitchen will be happening behind, which is quite traditional as part of the brief and the cultural background of our client. So there was a big requirement for those spaces behind the kitchen. Going on the other way, going on the other direction, one of the key elements when we discussed the design review panel conversation of this project was to break the massing and trying to get cross ventilation as much as possible, just because we got a large sort of floor plate. So what we sort of decided to with the design review panel is to get large spaces or outdoor areas to the south and the north that allows a breakup on the view form when you are going from the west to the east. Making a reference to where the laundry is. So the laundry is actually that bottom section next to the sort of large terrace area on the central part of the building. And there's got a drying courtyard. Again, that was part of the requirement. They want a drying courtyard. They don't want to see clothes hanging on the balconies or outdoor spaces visible from all the neighbors. Looking at making a response to the little lockers that you mentioned on that corridor. That is actually a wine cellar. And we were asked to provide wine cellars on each apartment. There are wine people, and that is part of the brief to some extent. The provision to the bedrooms, they were always asking, we have a relative coming from overseas with their family, sometimes in Canada, family in the US, they would like to have their own bathroom, and sometimes some of them, they might need to work from home, so there is one little sort of study notes in some of the bedrooms, because our client has actually come twice to Perth to just review the plans and provide them specifics about how the kids are going to live and how the relatives are going to be enjoying these sort of spaces. So the lack of clarity perhaps is the fact that we don't have the labels on each room, what they mean, but just to respond to that specific about the locker one, is just a wine cellar.
And I have similar questions on the floor above. Can you go to the next floor above? There are many areas on this level that also have no annotation, and there's no further detailed plans that shows what is happening.
So similar principle to the areas behind the kitchen. The brief for all the apartment was about having a second large kitchen sitting behind the display kitchen. And that's what we find those areas at the back. That is the main purpose of those areas in that sort of part of the floor plate. Going to the other side, he's a ping pong player, one of the kids. He's a professional ping pong player in China. And his trainer will be coming in here to play ping pong with him. I actually scheduled already my first game, which is his sort of. There is a large laundry across the road with, again, similar approach to the drying courtyard, and again, similar principle as the one that I just explained for the apartment below, and a similar arrangement for the bedrooms on the other side, and a wine cellar on the sort of northern part of the side. There is a provision for a kitchenette in this area, in case that someone is visiting at the back, and there is a small kitchen next to the wine cellar on the northern part of the side.
And on both the previous level and this level, the terrace spaces are not interacting directly with living spaces.
No.
These access of a corridor. Why is that in the context of the ARCO provisions, which talks about the living spaces interacting?
So a couple of things is from the design review process, it was more about trying to activate the street as much as possible. So that is why we got our living dining spaces on the Alexander Drive sort of edge with a large sort of balcony facing the street and with some landscape on the edge of the building. The principle behind those sort of terraces in the inside is more about breaking the view form and trying to get as much as we can cross ventilation. The design review panel was concerned from day one that the challenges of this sort of large floor plates was going to be how to get large amounts of cross ventilation as much as we can to the building. And also this offers the opportunity for some more private sort of outdoor areas in case that the kids or the daughter or the boy doesn't want to be on the street next to living dining spaces. This again offers also an opportunity for a secondary sort of fresco area for the people at the back of the house or the uncles or aunts visiting the relatives.
Those are my questions at this juncture.
Thank you. If you could stay with the plans, if panel members wouldn't mind if I just butted in a little bit. If we go to the next level up, which is the the top level. There are two lifts here. Could you please explain to me
Oh,
what
yeah.
what
easy.
that's
So
all
the
about?
first one, where the lift is everyone's lift. So people arriving on the ground floor,
Right.
going to each one of the levels.
Right.
The lift at the back of the main lift
Yeah.
is just a lift that we need to provide for disabled access to the pool area. And that is just a compliance requirement. We have to.
So the pool area is upper level.
Is slightly higher. And if you guys look at the section, we sort of work with a design review panel to create a lower section around the pool area. So when you are in the pool, you'll be around 1.2 below the sort of floor level, which means that you won't be able to look at your neighbors to the north or the south. And we demonstrated through different diagrams that the cone of vision wasn't going to compromise the privacy of any of our neighbors.
Okay, thank you. And if we go down to the ground floor, please, which was the first plan that you had up, we've got next to the lift, huge bin store area.
Yes.
And just near the entrance, lots and lots of letter boxes, which, you know, it just surprises me that the number of those things.
No, what we have included on that, let's say let's call it the airlock before you get to the actual front of the building. We need to allow for a fire indicator panel, which is a large piece of infrastructure when it comes to fire. And that goes on a specific requirements about how the doors open. And what you find is just probably 1 row or 2 rows of letterboxes. That is all what it is. We would probably explore including some for the drop off of Uber Eats or any of those sort of more online sort of shopping. So that is actually pretty much spot on in terms of what the allowances, special allowances would look like. But the larger amount of space that is being taken is more about the fire indicator panel that we need to make just next to the front door.
Okay, and
the one next door, sorry, just following, once you pass the front door, we just have to include a small bench for people waiting on the lobby downstairs. So that is no additional sort of letterboxing, that is the consent.
right. And are there modifications to the levels here? You've got a sort of basement fire tank area.
Yes.
Which has obviously got to have some height clearance.
Yes, so we are going down 1 basement, and that is just a services compliant. Once you have gone about 3 stories, the sort of sprinklers requirements are triggered, and you need to just provide the tanks.
Yeah. Okay. I'll move to other panel members for a while for questions. I may come back with some more. Other panel members' questions? Councillor Bennett, did you have any questions?
So while you're thinking, I have a question. Can you speak to the ground levels? I know the SAT 2021 talked, I think it's 2021, talked about building height, and it included in that a commentary around the ground level and the impact of a raised ground level on the site. Can you clarify this proposal? And the reason I'm referring to the SAT is it referenced it as being issue for bulk and scale. Can you speak on this proposal? I'm not interested in the previous proposal. On this proposal, what your plans are doing in that context?
Fundamentally, we're retaining the natural ground level at the street and also throughout the site. It's a very short question, I guess, to the question without referring to the tribunal decision and distinguishing from the previous application, which I understand you don't want me to do.
If it's critical to trying to give me an explanation, then
so
I suppose I'm not.
No.
I accept that these are different proposals. I think it's
Yeah,
really
and it is a different proposal, and obviously we need to consider this application on its merits. But that distinction between the two is relevant to the extent that it helps with the direction provided by the tribunal. The tribunal, when it came to building height, commented that the building was fundamentally 1 story too tall in the western half of the site, and that the bulk and scale and the building height impacts were exacerbated by the built form in that application proposing to increase natural ground level by at least 700 millimetres. On the elevations of the previous proposal, you can see an elevated ground level that was largely the function of a semi-subterranean basement structure that appeared to project above natural ground level 700 to 1.2. That obviously then pushed up the building height quite significantly, and the previous application had the 4 stories to the street. So the built form height at the street of the refused application was 15 metres, and the proposed built form height at the street of this application is 9.6. And that 9.6, when you reference the R-codes volume 2, because the R-codes volume 2 talk about building height in stories, not in metres, say that the 2-storey building is in the order of 9 metres. So by the time we get to the rear of the site and we're sitting at 12.8, again, that's more akin in the R-codes context to a 3-storey building. I accept that it isn't. We do have 4 stories at the rear, but insofar as the tribunal decision provides that distinction, the commentary was already made that the site is a transition from east to west. There's capacity for additional building height up to that 4 stories in the eastern half. The western half should be reduced in height to 3 stories, and the ground level should be kept as close to natural ground level as possible. And in guiding the development application, we have satisfied all of those guiding principles provided by the tribunal, and in turn established a streetscape building height that is reflective of what the community seems to prioritise in terms of a building height limit of 10 metres.
Did you have a question, Councillor Bennett?
No.
No, okay, Mr. Lee, do you have a question? Floor to floor dimension, is that 3.2?
3.2.
Okay, so floor to ceiling is,
We'll be aiming for at least 2.9. And our initial proposal when we started the conversation with the design proponent, and this is just to give a little more context, we were looking for a 3.4 floor to floor. Clearly, that was causing some issues, especially regarding the overshadowing to the sort of property, and so we decided to come down to 3.2. It's difficult these days to do less than 3.150 with all the technical requirements that you need to accommodate from services perspective.
okay. Tell me about the parking demand and how you have analysed that, and the provision that has been made for this development. And perhaps to you, Mr. Hollingworth, if this were not for one family, as you know, is kind of irrelevant to us, quite honestly. If this were, you know, all sold off for individuals, how would you assess the parking provision?
Our assessment has been based on what is good planning principles, which is fundamentally informed by reducing vehicle parking reliance. The location is location A, which is serviced by high frequency public transport. We are very comfortable that the vehicle parking provides for the client's brief to us, that they are not intending on having a significant number of vehicles at the site, and that they will the vehicle parking requirement is 8 bays with 2 for visitor.
But that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question. My question was, leaving aside that your brief is for a single family, our job is to determine this in terms of its land use, and therefore, if it were, you know, 5 units with this many bedrooms, you know, sufficient parking, is that part of your appraisal and your assessment?
Yep, we have had a traffic engineer provide advice on the vehicle parking provision, and again, we are comfortable with the approach that we've taken that's been determined by the client. In an assessment sense, if the floor plans were broken up, again, we would be compliant with the R codes that require 1 car bay per 2+ bedroom dwelling. And we don't support the city's contention that you need to provide 1 car bay per 2 bedrooms. I simply don't accept that. I understand that there might be a view that there's a requirement or a demand for additional vehicle parking, but that simply isn't the case in this instance. The submitters have also provided some very helpful guidance that the local area is very frequently patrolled by the rangers to ensure that the 2-hour limit on the eastern side of Alexander is enforced strictly. So the capacity for any off-site parking certainly doesn't seem to exist on the information provided.
All right, thank you for that answer. Are there any other questions of these presenters?
I will go back to that first question, if I may. Sorry, I've gone back to you. I think my clarification is that planning approval runs with land
not occupier. You referred in the response about parking to two matters. One was it meets your client's request, which I have some questions about in the context of it runs with the land, not the landowner. So can you revisit that in the context of the planning framework? Because a broad planning principle, any planning principle is any approval runs with the land regardless of who the owner is.
Yes, absolutely.
So
And of course we accept that.
I want to try to understand what you're saying it is in the context of the proposal for us, which is 5 multiple dwellings, and what you're saying we should be taking into consideration as any alternate consideration, and what you're basing that on.
Yeah, I think though that if we of course we accept that the planning approval runs with the land, but if there was ever an intention to sell the dwelling off, equally there would be a very clear limit on the vehicle parking provided and the parking limits within the locality if there was any desire to use the street parking, which evidently that isn't able to be done. So a purchaser of a dwelling in this building would be aware of the vehicle parking limits. There is no intention though to sell it off, but equally I understand that there is a consideration around that. But fundamentally in purchasing the apartment, they'll be aware of the vehicle parking that is being provided for.
My final question is around the land use. And you talked about the development form, and I'm trying to get some clarity around land use. Multiple dwellings are defined under the scheme, defined under the planning provisions, as well as what a dwelling is defined. You spoke that today about family members, but I'm not getting clarity at this stage as to what you refer to by that. The scheme, and particularly the R codes, defines what a family actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Are you telling me something different?
I don't believe so, if I understand.
So do they meet that definition? Single family unit or less than 6 non-related. So you talked about extended people and other people coming, which seems like a question of land use.
I understand your question. I don't believe that they would satisfy the definition of a single family for the purposes of whether it is a multiple dwelling or not. It certainly is a multiple dwelling.
So you're saying would not satisfy?
Would not satisfy definition of a single family or single house.
Yes, correct. It isn't a single house because there are multiple families, in the sense that there's cousins, uncles, nephews, parents.
So in that context, why should we call it multiple dwellings?
Because they're intended to be occupied by separate families.
That belong to a larger family.
Yeah.
Explain it further for me. You just said it doesn't comply with the single house, and I've referred to 5 multiple dwellings and the arcade provision of what a dwelling is.
So
and then you've said it doesn't satisfy the definition.
I'm just looking to
Not more than 6 people
yeah.
from different individual people.
Yes. So I'm just trying to load
It's
the
contained in the
definition so I can
archives.
speak with some
Yep.
authority.
The planning legislation links back to the R codes. You'll find the definition in the R codes volume 1.
Sorry, I'm signaling.
Perhaps if you have it there, Ms. Levante, you could read it out for the benefit of others in the room who don't have access.
So in terms of definition, it is R code volume 1, definition of dwelling, a building or portion of building being used, adapted or designed or intended to be used for the purpose of human habitation on a permanent basis by a single person, a single family, or no more than 6 persons who do not comprise a single family. That's what the scheme, that's what the R code definition says. There's a completely separate, a different definition that starts to talk about dual key. This is not what you've got here, but that's what I'm referring to. And what I heard you say is it doesn't meet that definition.
But no, it does meet that definition because each floor is an individual dwelling. So I'm still trying to load it.
All right.
Certainly where I would need to be able to download the definitions while you're speaking, so I apologise, I'm unable to, but we are very comfortable that it is firmly within the definition of what we're doing.
Any other,
No, sorry. Are you with the applicant?
Yeah, I'm staying in that house.
But you haven't requested a presentation.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Councillor Brent, did you have any questions? No, Mr. Lee. Anything more from you, Mr. Flanton?
no.
Any more questions from you, Councillor Breckenridge? I think we should move ahead with the item then if we're all satisfied with your questions at this point.
Could I just take this opportunity
Well, people are free to come up and get water if they wish to, but thank you for offering. If those people who have mobility issues require some, we have an offer to distribute water at this point, but I want to keep the focus on the meeting, please. Okay. You sure you haven't got any more questions?
I've got one other question actually. Can you tell me about this caretaker that you were referring to?
The caretaker
Yes.
is a chauffeur that might be traveling or could be traveling with them when they are visiting Perth or one of the kids is moving to Perth. So we'll be helping them with all the sort of driving.
So
and he might be coming with, I believe, with his family. So that's why the reason of the caretaker apartment at the back with the three bedrooms.
So what is the space up on the top floor that's got a sort of a room that seems to be independent of any?
That is a room that is part of the amenity area. So as part of the brief, the client requested a steam room, a sauna, and a massage room. So that is as part of the amenity
That
area.
single bedroom area.
Is more like a
bed.
massage room, part of the sort of spa at the top. So that is not a proper sort of bedroom. That is what the drawings sort of suggest.
Shall we, are we
Sorry,
good with
yeah,
questions
sorry.
here? All right, we'll let you go and we will invite the council officers forward, please. We have Kirsty Klimke and Sergio Famiano, who have prepared the responsible authority report and assessed the matter. First of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Famiano and Ms. Klimke if you have any comments that you would like to make as a result of the presentations, or if you would like to go straight to questions.
Look, I'll probably just, I won't say too much because I think the residents have done
Please.
I think the residents have done a very good job of articulating some legitimate concerns with this particular development. The only thing I'll add and will reiterate as a concern that I see is particularly the bulk and scale of this particular development. We don't have an issue with the fact that there are multiple dwellings. We do have an issue with the bulk and scale of the development, and that did feature in the SAT hearing when a previous application of this nature was refused. And the fact that the bulk and scale was considered a major issue, and how this particular development fits into the context of its surroundings. If you look at the bulk and scale and the plot ratio, it's 18%. I think it's 182 square meters of floor area. And as you know, with multiple dwellings, you get concessions, certain spaces are taken out of that. But 182 square meters, that's equivalent to a single residential home. That's a lot of space that's added to this development. And I echo the concerns of the residents that this particular development is out of scale with its surroundings. And I think that's a real concern for the city. Another concern, which I'll reiterate, is car parking. I know that if you look at the definition of multiple dwellings and the number of car parking bays that you actually need, given that I see this as a little bit of a special case because the R codes were designed for typical families of two parents and two children or three children. as a typical household. However, what we've got here is very different. We've got 21 bedrooms. And if you were to assume, let's just play devil's advocate, that half of the occupants of this development have a car, 10 people, you would need at least 10 bays plus visitor parking, and we don't have that on site. So it's just something to consider. And it is a bit of a failing of the residential design codes, I think, to accommodate developments of this type of scale. They don't happen often. I can understand why the state hasn't accommodated, but I think special consideration needs to be given that is there enough car parking on this site to cater for potentially 21 people, potentially 10 or plus adults who all have a car, whether there would be enough vehicle parking on this site.
All right, thank you. I'll open to questions now of the city officers. Councillor Brackenridge, did you have questions of the officers?
No, thank you.
Right, panel members in the room, questions of the officers. Councillor Bennett.
Hello. With regards to the WhatsApp 41, it was asserted that Judge Parry believed that only having 3 stories on the western side facing Alexander Road and still having 4 stories would be acceptable. That wasn't my interpretation of reading that. What was your interpretation? Was Judge Parry referring to the entire 4th story as being a problem, or only in certain areas?
My understanding is that the decision doesn't preclude a 4th story. It does, however, send a message in terms of how that 4th story is delivered and developed on site. The proposal has gone, I think, some way into mitigating that particular issue by setting back the 4th story towards the rear end of the development, and therefore from the streetscape you see more of a 3-story proposal. But coinciding with that determination, there's also the bulk and scale issue, which we feel hasn't been addressed.
Just to drill down on that a little bit more, it seemed like one of the largest concerns was the overshadowing. And so if a design was to remove a 4th story on the eastern side, but still, on the western side, but still have a 4th story on the western side, the overshadowing problem still exists, does it not?
Yeah, it's challenging because like if you were to move the dwelling for the 4th floor forward, for example, to the streetscape, you would probably reduce the level of overshadowing to the adjoining properties somewhat. But then you have another issue, don't you? You have the issue that you present as a very bulky and scaly development. So it's a difficult one to resolve.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of the officers? Mr. Bunting?
No.
Could you just, there's been some question around plot ratio. Could you just explain a little further how it was assessed for this purpose, and how we've reached a conclusion in your report that we're at 18% over, or 182.2 square metres over? There's been some challenge around the way it's been assessed.
It's been assessed in accordance with the definition of plot ratio.
In the ARCOs?
In the ARCOs, correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I have any more questions either. Did you have any questions? No? All good? All right, we'll let you go. Thank you. And we will move ahead with the item. Now we have in front of us the responsible authority recommendation to refuse the application. Could I just ask for quiet, please, at this point? Excuse me. Could I just ask for a little quiet? Thank you. We have the responsible authority recommendation to refuse the application for 6 reasons. I would seek, please, a mover for that as the substantive motion. Have a mover? Councillor Bennett, thank you. Is that seconded, please? Councillor Brackenbridge seconds. Thank you. Councillor Bennett, as mover, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you. Firstly, with regards to local planning policy 5.8, that was put in place in 2021 and remained in place for several years, 2 years at least. And the revocation of that 5.8 only occurred because the decision maker, the council, believed that all aspects of 5.8 had been replicated in the new policy 5.14. And it took a new development application that exceeded what the community believed was a height limit to bring that to everyone's attention. The council was unaware that they had removed a height limit, and the community was not consulted about the revocation of that height limit policy. It wasn't advertised in the same way as all the other policies that were revoked, in a bunch of policies that were revoked. And I think there is actually still some lingering doubt about whether it actually may still be in force and wasn't revoked correctly. But putting that aside, there is still the Judge Parry WASAP 41 decision from 2021. And actually, as a segue from what I was just talking about, Judge Parry actually didn't take into account LPP 5.8 and dismissed it. And there was some commentary today that 5.8 being reinstated is reactionary. I'm not sure it could be described as reactionary when the policy existed for 2 years previously, and there was actually legitimate confusion that it had been revoked at all, and the correct process to revoke it wasn't actually followed. But putting that aside, Judge Parry still formed well-reasoned reasons that he found that development, previous development, should have been refused. And in all relevant aspects, this development is very much similar. And in terms of addressing the concerns that Judge Parry pointed out, it's not enough just to make a change and say that change has addressed the problem. It has to actually result in a real world change that is more than just a planning excuse, so to speak. So if Judge Parry says there needs to be articulation, the articulation has to be in a way that actually reduces overshadowing. The fact that articulation's been put in isn't enough. And I believe the local residents have also engaged Lavan legal planners and somebody to accurately measure the overshadowing, and the overshadowing problem still persists. And that overshadowing problem is the basis of Judge Parry's decision. And that makes pretty much all the points that he found wrong with that previous iteration from years ago, all of them are still relevant. So the 6 principles that Judge Parry raised were: does the proposed development achieve the R Code's Volume 2 element objectives for design element 2.2 building height? Well, according to the R80 zoning alone, a very tall building can be built there. But when the entire planning regulations are read in their entirety, overshadowing has to be taken into account. Overshadowing of solar panels, overshadowing of common areas with large windows facing north that were specifically designed to take advantage of the northern light, and overshadowing of garden and private areas. The second principal issue was, does the proposed development achieve the R Code Volume 2 element objectives for design element 2.5 plot ratio? Well, we've heard here today that the plot ratio has increased. I don't think that's when Judge Parry was indicating what might be an appropriate development. I don't think when he raises plot ratio as a concern, and this development has a significantly higher plot ratio, clearly that fails that principal issue that Judge Parry had highlighted. And as we've heard, if you actually consider it in all the other areas which are not counted in a grouped dwelling development, this plot ratio is very, very large, much more than the 1.18 stated, and that is already 18% way over density for this site. The third principal issue was, does the proposed development achieve the R Codes Volume 2 element objectives for design element 3.2 orientation? No. Again, the orientation of a tall, long building on an east-west site where all the other houses in this area are narrow east-west sites and very prone to overshadowing, the orientation chosen still causes overshadowing. And we've heard that actually there probably is an alternate form of development that does satisfy the R80 coding and probably would fit just as many people in there. We've heard that a 4 by 3 story development would probably provide just as much developable area and house just as many people, yet the orientation of those and the height and the overshadowing would be completely eliminated. And as we've heard, the community is completely acceptive of something around 3 stories. And that brings us to the other principal issues. Is the proposed development compatible with its setting? Well, this area has been subdivided historically into very narrow east-west lots that were intended to have R10 to R20 type development on it. And that trend has continued over the years, and the majority of this area is exactly that, a subdivided narrow lot running east-west, and each development takes care not to overly overshadow the neighbour to the south. And so with a limit of 2 stories and a housing style and a streetscape and setbacks and a neighbourhood character that's all consistent, and then this development, which is 4 stories and a completely different kind of development, no, it's not compatible in its setting. It causes a lot of, it's a disjointed, it would completely destroy and create a disjointed streetscape, and it would be odd to have a 4-story building jutting out against other 2-story housing, which is unlikely to be developed. These are very high value, recently built, well thought out, often solar passive houses, and to just stick a very large building to the north that eliminates all those aspects of the good design, clearly it's not compatible in its setting. Will the proposed development have an unacceptable adverse impact on the amenity of number 8 Alexander Road? Clearly, yes. In winter, this building will be almost entirely in shadow. So not only did the solar panels not produce, the house will be colder, the house will be darker, and the amenity for the residents of that house is substantially compromised. The house was built to take advantage of northern light, and then a development to the north intends to completely eliminate that northern light. It is a serious amenity issue. Would approval of the proposed development be consistent with orderly and proper planning? Once again, no, it does not. Orderly and proper planning would need to take into account the existing housing stock and the fact that it's been recently subdivided into narrow east-west lots. All of these houses are quite new, and some are actually just being built as we speak. and they're all two-story, intended to be of a similar streetscape to maintain the character of that street. This development is completely out of character. And then there are the aspects to the strange land use and the strange size of the apartments. In actual fact, the entire story around a family wishing to live here and what their wishes are, the story about who is going to live there is just a story, and it's not really a planning consideration and shouldn't really impact whether this is a good design or not. The development applications have to be designed with the mind that this family may never live here. It may get built and may get sold. So the story behind it is actually irrelevant. The parking, as we've heard, because there are so many double bedroom beds in this apartment, even if only half of them are adults, the parking is insufficient. And if it actually turns out that it's predominantly adults, there is without question going to be parking spilling out onto Alexander Road, which already has a serious parking problem. And then finally, the landscaping is extremely underwhelming. We've heard that this very attractive, high-profile street, which actually has been mentioned as a greenway and renowned for having nice landscaping and a nice presentation, a nice streetscape, the landscaping in this development is actually not actually up to standard with the rest of the community. And just finally, to close, there is a long history here in this area. The community has been heard loud and clear multiple times that 3 stories is acceptable and 4 stories brings you into the territory of actually coming into conflict with Judge Parry's ruling. So as I said, this development is not different enough from the previous that we can ignore the fact that 4 stories causes overshadowing. In all aspects, Judge Parry's ruling is still completely valid. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brackenbridge, as seconder, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, thank you, Member. I think Councillor Bennett covered everything there, but my main concerns is the bulk and scale of the development. And I mean, I don't know if infill, if this nature is or isn't representative of the desired future character of the street. If it was, what's meddled with that vision, rightly or wrongly, was the intermediate zoning of R20 in between the R10 and the R80 zoning. When the R20 zoning was implemented, owners took rapid response to that upzoning of the street. So now the street is particularly dominated by new or newish 2-story single residential dwellings. Whether or not this is or isn't the desired future character of the street, it certainly is the evolved character of the street. This means that the current streetscape will be around for decades to come, potentially 50 to 100 years from now. And for this reason and for other planning reasons, other planning concerns like, overshadowing, plot ratio, parking, which have already been discussed, I cannot support this. At 4 stories in height, it's too incongruous with the current and future surrounding scale and streetscape, which won't be changing anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers for or against the motion? Ms. Lafante?
I'll speak to the motion on the table. I won't go over the matters I've already covered. I do have reservations about land use. I have articulated some of those today. I am seeking to move an amendment, it'll be Amendment 1, to add the following comment in, that the proposed development in its current form is not considered to meet the land use classification of 5 multiple dwellings due to the lack of information on the design configuration, rooms and spaces, which are not labelled in terms of either use and the details and associated details on including bedrooms, bathroom numbers, open space terraces, which has a lack of connection to the outdoor living area. And in some ways, my...
Would you like to say?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes.
I'm happy to second that, which would be an additional reason added to the motion before us. Ms. Lafante, would you like to speak to that?
My concerns are is that the elements that have been discussed today have talked about multi-generational families, single family, and a variety of multiple units. There are elements in this plan that, from my perspective, are incomplete, and therefore on a substantial development of this nature, I have some concerns that there are some questions about its land use. The form and configuration is very unusual. I did point out some of those in terms of the very large kitchen areas, the series of rooms and spaces, and the way they're configured. This is information that I feel is insufficient in order to satisfactorily, from my perspective, be comfortable that it meets that land use classification.
Thank you. I concur with your assessment. I find that there is a lack of information on the plans to confirm that this is genuinely a multiple dwelling. It could lend itself more to residential accommodation for other purposes. We've seen a shift in presentation from 5 dwellings to 7 dwellings and so forth. There are a number of spaces within the plan of significant scale and a very large number of bathrooms and powder rooms, etc. And I think that if that were the case, there were maybe serious other problems. So I think that definition definitely needs to be considered carefully in the aspect of how we determine this application. Other speakers on this amending motion? I'll come back to you. Let's vote on this amending motion, which is to add an additional reason as spoken by Ms. Lafante to the motion in front of us. Those in favour? That's 4 people. Against? You have to vote.
Have to vote?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be against.
Okay, thank you. That motion is carried 4-1. The floor is back with you, Ms. Lafante.
I think a number of those matters have been articulated from in terms of built form and in my particular case parking, and I do think that additional material needs to be provided in relation to this. As I've already indicated, the development runs with the land, it's not with the owner or the occupier. That's how the planning provisions and legislation is structured, and from my perspective I'm not satisfied that the information provided, and I do have some genuine concerns in relation to car parking for developments, multiple dwellings or dwellings of this scale, where we have effectively for some of the units 1 bay per dedicated bay per unit, and in this locational context of the scale of building, I have some questions that this is a sufficient provision.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
I just a couple of things. I agree that we shouldn't approve this, but I want to make a couple of points. So I actually understand the planning, and I've done work for large Asian families and Crown Casino and all that. So that all makes sense. So I want to commend the designer on the proposal, because there's a lot of good things with it. It's meeting the client's brief. I think it's a quality proposal, and I think that it's actually it had full approval from the council's own design review panel, and there are a lot of positive things about it. My problem is the 4th floor. The 4th floor is from overlooking, and it's actually 195 square metres. So if it's 182 square metres over, I'm happy to give plot ratio bonuses if they don't adversely affect things, but in this case, that area adversely affects things. Secondly, the appeals running with the
the land and not the landowner. It's we need to future-proof these things. If there's 21 bedrooms and bathrooms and 8 kitchens, that's equivalent of 7 or 8 3-bedroom apartments. The parking that's provided for that isn't enough and would cause problems if and when the building gets used for something else. So for those 2 main reasons, I can't support the approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I will also speak to the motion. I think we do have to recognise that this has had a fairly unique planning framework history, and things have been built under different scheme requirements, which has led to the streetscape that we have. But that is what we have. And although additional height might be afforded under an R80 zone, that is not height as of right. That consideration of height needs to be set in the context and surrounding amenity and streetscape. And I think that's an important factor. We just don't jump to the maximum height afforded under our codes or other policies which might replace the codes in the future. For me, this is an issue, I think, as others have said, of height and bulk of scale, and finding this incompatible with the streetscape and the adjacent properties. I do concur with Mr. Lee that it really comes down to that additional 4th floor. And when we consider that in conjunction with the excess in plot ratio, one really understands that this is perhaps an overdevelopment of this particular lot in the context of the adjacent neighbouring properties. I think that the assessment that has done, we've heard a lot about different policies under the City of Nedlands policy framework, but the assessment that has been done, if we're clear, has been done under the R codes. And therefore there's a level of consistency about the application of that assessment, and they are the key reasons that are before us for refusal. I think the issue of a family living here or associated extended family is somewhat misleading. We don't ever, shouldn't ever approve things on the basis of an occupant or an operator. It has to be about the bricks and the mortar and the actual built form and the actual land use itself, and safeguarding, I think it was the right phrase. I see that there could be many alternates of use to this, and that concerns me. I'm not sure that we have necessarily had an assessment of this from the point of view of it performing a more residential purpose, which I think it potentially could lend itself to. But nonetheless, in the sense that it is being assessed as a multiple dwelling development, I find also that there is insufficient information on trip generation, on noise, on waste potentially. And I do note that the DRP did support it, but I think what we're here to do is to consider the planning matters associated with this, and not just the design aspects from a purely architectural point of view. So for those reasons, I'm comfortable to support the motion before us to refuse with the additional amendment that we have made. And as I'm the penultimate speaker, I hand back to Councillor Bennett as mover to right of reply and closure of debate.
I think I've said enough in my opening remarks, so I'll close. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me put this to the vote. This is the substantive motion for refusal plus the amendment that has been carried. Those in favour? That is a unanimous decision. Thank you. Now, if I could just have a bit of quiet in the room, because I do have some other bits on my agenda, only minor matters. There are no Form DAP applications to report on, and section SAT considerations. They appear in other localities at the moment outside of Nedlands, but matters for Vincent, South Perth and Cambridge concerning this inner metro DAP. Before I close, I would just like to thank everybody for their respect for each other during those presentations. Thank you. And ability to listen and resolve questions that were put to you. I know it can be quite a nerve-wracking thing, but thank you all very much indeed for attending. And sorry it took so long. I will now close at 12:43. Thank you.
Thank you.